Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook. People in Marvel. I become apprentice mage in Kamar Taj at the beginning. Chapter 61. Ancient nodded. It's okay to wait in vain. Space magic is really difficult to understand, and I am very pleased that you can realize things in these 5 hours. Ji Yuyi said slowly, I hope that what you realize will help you. It really helps. I feel that my mind is much clearer, and the magical energy in my body seems to be stronger. Zhang Yang said to Ji Yuyi with some excitement. Well, Ji Yuyi, in space magic, space teleportation is the most basic. You can now try to use space gems to combine your magic energy to see where you can teleport farthest, and by the way, simply test whether your magic energy has a breakthrough. Zhang Yang nodded and took the cosmic cube with the object retrieval magic. According to Ji Yuyi's instructions, Zhang Yang used magic energy to drive the cosmic Rubik's cube. The blue cosmic cube began to shine with blue light under the impetus of Zhang Yang's energy. Ji Yupin sat opposite Zhang Yang, watching the energy in the cosmic cube slowly become stronger, and soon, the blue light began to grow larger and a portal opened. With a flash of blue light, almost in the blink of an eye, Zhang Yang and Ji Yuyi disappeared. When he opened his eyes again, Zhang Yang only saw darkness and chaos around him. This darkness is boundless, there is no end in sight, and there are strange creatures all around. This place is like a huge and mysterious space, a space that Zhang Yang has never seen before. Master, what is this place? Zhang Yang couldn't help but be a little puzzled. He seemed to be waiting for Furuchi to explain to him. However, Furuchi never spoke. When Zhang Yang looked at Ji Yuyi again, he didn't know if it was his illusion. He actually saw it on the face of Ji Yuyi, who had always been calm, alarmed. Right, Zhang Yang was sure that the expression was a kind of panic. This made Zhang Yang couldn't help but be a little stunned. He had just teleported to the farthest place he could grasp according to the picture that suddenly flashed in his mind, following Furuchi's instructions. But as for where this place is, Zhang Yang really doesn't know. The most important thing is that it can make Ji Yuyi's face panic. It seems that this should be a great place. Don't ask, let's go. Just as Zhang Yang lost his mind, Ji Yuyi suddenly spoke. Zhang Yang could obviously feel that when Ji Yuyi said this, there was a tremor at the corner of his mouth and twitch. When Ji Yuyi said this, Zhang Yang was a little confused. And that's gone. Zhang Yang was about to ask a question, but Ji Yuyi almost didn't pause, and then said, it's too late for Dormammu to find out. Dormammu. Zhang Yang felt a slump in his heart. Dormammu. Isn't that the Dark Dimension Lord that the senior brothers are afraid of when they mention it? A villain who has spent centuries on Earth to do evil and has not been able to solve it. Isn't it, sir? This will make Zhang Yang feel a little nervous in his heart. He couldn't help but look at Ji Yuyi. And at this moment, the expression on Ji Yuyi's face was not very good. Although at this time, Ji Yuyi still maintained her usual cold temperament very well. But Zhang Yang can clearly feel it. Ji Yuyi was a little unsure. Nonsense. How could this Gui be calm? Ji Yuyi just let Zhang Yang try to teleport to the farthest place. Zhang Yang actually teleported directly to Dormammu. You know, Furuchi met Dormammu at a very young age. The battle with Dormammu has been fought from the young age of the Ancient One to the present. In order to be able to eliminate Dormammu, Ji Yuyi can be described as struggling with his brain. But the question is that the hegemon of one dimension can be eliminated so easily. In desperation, all Ji Yuyi could do was spend time with Dormammu. And the so-called consumption is that Dormammu came to Earth once, and Ji Yuyi fought off Dormammu once. Infinite loop, passive year after year. Ji Yuyi has lived for so long, and Dormammu has always been Ji Yuyi's hard knot. Not to mention that Ji Yuyi will run when he sees Dormammu, but at least Ji Yuyi will definitely not take the initiative to provoke Dormammu. You know, Ji Yuyi has not suffered a loss in so many centuries of confrontation with Dormammu. It's just that the ancient 10,000 did not think of it. One day, Ji Yuyi would be sent directly to Dormammu by his apprentice with a portal. Ostentatious. I'm afraid you're not punting your master. God knows the collapse in Ji Yuyi's heart at this moment. Come on. While Dormammu has not yet come, go quickly, otherwise it will be difficult. At this moment, Ji Yuyi's brain was in pain, and she was a little speechless. Although Ji Yuyi had also heard about it, Zhang Yang would occasionally do something more shocking. But did you go too far today? Where are you going badly? Send your master to Dormammu. Oh, good. After listening to Ji Yuyi's words, Zhang Yang came back to his senses and was about to leave the portal. At this moment, a deafening and wanton laughter came from all sides of this dark space. Go. My territory is also a place where you can come and go whenever you want. With this eerie laughter, Zhang Yang felt that the feet under which he was standing began to shake violently. A huge face that looked like it was enough to devour the sun, moon, and stars appeared in front of Zhang Yang and Ji Yuyi's eyes. Ji Yuyi's face changed, and he said in a deep voice, "Not good. It's over, Dormammu is here. Furuchi lived for so long. I never imagined that she was actually depressed by her apprentice. This is a flamboyant, but it is a hard pit for Ji Yuyi. Don't say that Ji Yuyi sent Dormammu here, but also shocked Dormammu." At this moment, Ji Yuyi was completely speechless. Originally, when he didn't alarm Dormammu, he took advantage of his unpreparedness and opened a portal to maybe he could go out. But now, Dormammu is here, and this is hanging. Isn't it, really, when Dormammu's dark dimension is so good to enter? You know, in the past time. Unless it is Dormammu's voluntary retreat or when Dormammu is very weak. Otherwise, with the ability of Ancient One, it will be difficult to retreat from the dark dimension of Dormammu. God, this is Dormammu. It's not some shrimp soldier crab general. Who is Dormammu, O Lord of the Dark Dimension? You know, in the dimension of Dormammu, even the wireless rough stone can't play any role. You can imagine how terrifying the dark dimension is. If he had expected this result in the morning, Ji Yuyi would not have been able to let Zhang Yang drive farthest no matter what. Who knew that Zhang Yang could directly break through the dimension? How long has Zhang Yang only taken the cosmic cube? Even according to the talent of genius, Zhang Yang should only be able to travel in different dimensional spaces without restriction now. But this will be ostentatious. Coupled with the portal practiced before and the cosmic cube used yesterday, the teleportation magic is only practiced for 3 days at most, and this Nima directly breaks through the dimension. Hiss. Take a breath of cool air. In the end, it is Ji Yuyi, who has lived for a long time and has seen more things. Although he was shocked, Furuchi quickly calmed down. The matter has come to this: if you can't run, then fight. After all, Ji Yuyi did not fight with Dormammu. Ji Yuyi, who was just relieved, was now a little more puzzled about Zhang Yang's identity and ability. Ancient One discovery more than once. The eye of Agamotto cannot see the open future, except for the holy light. Moreover, her strong perception could not detect the thinking in Zhang Yang's mind. This reminded Furuchi of what Odin had reminded her when he came to her before. Zhang Yang is not the one that Kamar Taj can stay. Ji Yuyi, I didn't come to you, but I didn't expect that you actually came to me. Ji Yuyi was thinking. Dormammu spoke. However, since you are here, it is not so easy to leave. I don't want to come to this place. I can leave if you want. His words pulled Ji Yuyi's thoughts back. Ji Yuyi's eyes were stunned, and he put his hands behind him and looked at Dormammu calmly. When you wantonly seduced the mage on earth, you should have thought that there would be such a day. Furuchi said, raising his hand to make a magic starting gesture, as if ready to move. At this moment, Ji Yuyi suddenly felt that his eyes were dark, but he blinked. When he opened his eyes again, Ji Yuyi was already standing in the temple. Ancient One, what's going on? What about Dormammu? It's okay, the master who runs fast. Just as Ji Yuijung was wondering, an open voice came from his ears. Ancient Yi Lang. Just, it seems like, Zhang Yang opened the portal, and then sent the two of them out. Wait a minute, Zhang Yang actually came out with a portal. And he came out directly from under the nose of Dormammu. What's going on? No, Zhang Yang, are you a little too unaware of Dormammu? At this time, Ji Yuyi looked at Zhang Yang, although he was silent, but his mind was full of question marks and surprise. This apprentice of hers has something. It's so dangerous, master, fortunately I ran away. Zhang Yang said on the side, relieved. It seemed that Zhang Yang didn't seem to know that the act of opening the portal from the dark dimension of Dormammu just now was something that Ji Yuyi couldn't help but be shocked by. Indeed, after a while, Ji Yuyi finally came to his senses, nodded and said to Zhang Yang. This will be a bit confusing. She looked at Zhang Yang and couldn't tell whether Zhang Yang was pretending, or she really didn't know how unexpected what she was doing. The dark dimension of Dormammu is definitely not a place where you can enter and exit if you want. First of all, to enter the dark dimension, you have to know black magic. Secondly, entering and exiting the dark dimension must be approved by Dormammu. Both, less the same. But what made Ji Yuyi a little shocked? Zhang Yang did not have the aura of dark magic on his body, nor did he have magical energy powerful enough to shock Dormammu. But he can come and go freely in the dark dimension. Koichi thought that maybe he should take the time to talk to Odin. Master, isn't that Dormammu very powerful? I heard senior brother say that Dormammu seems to be the master of the dark dimension. At this moment, Zhang Yang looked at Ji Yuyi and couldn't help asking. You know, Zhang Yang really felt nervous in his heart just after hearing Dormammu's name. After all, for Zhang Yang, who has only watched Avengers 3, the name Dormammu is somewhat unfamiliar. You may be familiar with Thanos. But the problem is that according to Zhang Yang's understanding after coming to Kamar Taj, although Thanos is difficult to deal with, there are no infinity stones. Thanos is no match for Furuchi. And Dormammu is different. That was an opponent who gave Ji Yuyi a headache. Although Zhang Yang knows that maybe he will always have to confront Dormammu one day. Because that guy is ambitious and wants to devour the earth. But now, Zhang Yang is not 100% sure that he can defeat Dormammu. So, he ran fast enough. Yes, Dormammu holds all the power of dark magic and darkness, and in his dark dimension, he is the all-powerful and all-knowing god. Furuchi explained, and couldn't help but walk to the table and pour a cup of tea and take a sip. It's fine. Zhang Yang sighed in a low voice and let out another breath. Dark dimension. Dormammu. Since Ji Yuyi you are here, then don't think about it. A flash of blue light. Dormammu. What about people? Dormammu is now a little confused. Not only confused, but also a little depressed. Originally looking at the sudden appearance of Ji Yuyi, Dormammu was overjoyed. He has always wanted to go to Earth to do trouble. But Ji Yuyi, this guy is really annoying, and he destroys his good deeds every time. No, Dormammu can only think of something else. Recently, it is calculated that the ancient limit is approaching, and it is about to go to the immortal emperor to report on the Earth. Dormammu also began to move. In order not to go to Earth like several times before, he was driven out by Ji Yuyi. Dormammu thought of finding more believers, and when Ji Yuyi went to the Eternal Emperor, he would devour the Earth in one fell swoop. It's just that I didn't expect that he wouldn't go to Earth to find trouble with Ji Yuyi, and Ji Yuyi, this guy, actually came to the door himself. In ancient times, the dark dimension was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. In the dark dimension, there is no one who cannot be controlled by him. What's more, this was still Ji Yuyi himself bumped into, when his strength was at its strongest. And most crucially, Ji Yuyi still seems to have a young man with a good magical energy. If it can be absorbed, then his strength will be stronger. This kind of good thing with one stone, Dormammu does not want to miss it. He originally shouted with Ji Yuyi for 2 words and started, but before Dormammu's words were finished, Ji Yuyi and her apprentice inexplicably disappeared from the dark dimension. Dormammu was completely speechless. He said on the front foot that the dark dimension is not a place where you can come and go as you want. The words were instantly slapped in the face when they didn't fall. Don't give him this dark dimension to dominate face at all. Or is it really just coming? Just go. Dormammu is very depressed at the moment, not only depressed, but also a little irritable. Koichi, Kamar Taj. One day, I will devour you with darkness. Dormammu was furious. The entire dark dimension was trembling. Late at night, Kamar Taj. Ji Yuyi was meditating with his eyes closed in the temple, when Wang and Mordo came together. Seeing Ji Yuyi, the two saluted, Supreme Venerable. Furuchi slowly opened his eyes, with an unexpected seriousness on his face. Do you know what happened when I called you over? Mordo and Wang looked at each other and shook their heads. Ji Yuyi's mind was as unfathomable as her ability, and it was not something that ordinary people could guess at will. Today I asked Zhang Yang to practice teleportation magic, and he broke through after 5 hours of meditation in my temple. Ji Yuyi revealed the mystery. It's just that it's good not to reveal it, but it made Wang and Mordo feel sour in their hearts. It is acid indeed. Sour doesn't work. Zhang Yang is starting to do whatever he wants because of his good talent. Arrogant. Too arrogant. How long has it been since you come to Kamar Taj? Add up to more than 10 days, right? Teleportation magic broke through. Mordo and Wang are sour and angry. The magic thing is originally more difficult to get to the back, especially when it comes to breaking through the bottleneck period. Some people can get stuck for a lifetime. But Zhang Yang poured well, and after 5 hours of meditation, he broke through. Bah! Monster! Pulling up the corners of his mouth, Mordo could barely squeeze out an ant-like smile on his face. Mordo, that's a happy thing. It's just outrageous. Don't give Kamar Taj's other mages a way to live. Mordo, the little junior brother has a good understanding, which is also normal. That's not the understanding that a normal person should have at all. There is definitely something wrong with this girl. Ji Yuyi, actually, you don't have to force yourself. Sighing, Furuchi continued, it is indeed a happy event. 2 excellent mages might as well guess how far he has broken through. Outstanding. Don't say that, it's really a shame. Mordo frowned. Could it be that Zhang Yang can now teleport to other planets? Wang shook his head. Senior brother, be bold and guess. I estimate that Zhang Yang should now be able to teleport in different dimensional spaces without limits. Ji Yuyi shook his head. Combined with the power of the cosmic Rubik's Cube, he has now broken the dimension and teleported. King. Mordo. Oh beasts. Even Mordo can't break the dimension teleportation now. Zhang Yang is pressing the faces of all the mages of Kamar Taj to the ground and rubbing awe. With the blessing of the cosmic Rubik's Cube, it is natural that the little junior disciple's talent is so good. Although he was jealous in his heart, Mordo's face was still full of reluctant smiles. Ji Yu nodded, and suddenly, her expression changed. He teleported me into the dark dimension of Dormammu today. King. Mordo. Master, can you say it all at once? Your next blow, our little hearts can't stand it. God. Zhang Yang can now not only break the dimension teleportation, but also teleport to the dark dimension of Dormammu. This is simply a breakthrough of 2 or 3 orders in a row. From Odin's dimensional space, directly broke through to the dark dimension. Wang and Mordo couldn't help but glance at each other and swallowed their saliva. Take a breath of cool air. You guys, didn't you find anything wrong? Just when the two were angry, Ji Yuyi suddenly asked. This made Wang and Mordo stunned. Issue. What other problems can be found? What else can be said besides proving that the flamboyant magical talent is high? Wait a minute, dark dimension. Master, do you suspect that Zhang Yang has learned black magic? In the end, it was the knowledgeable Wang who was the first to react and realize the problem. Furuchi shook his head, but he doesn't have dark magic energy in him. Wang nodded, indeed. Zhang Yang really didn't have any aura of black magic on him. But Cassius, who has always revealed an evil aura on his body recently, I don't know if Wang thinks too much. What is the master worried about? Wang looked at Ji Yuyi and couldn't help asking. Ji Yuyi turned around, put his hands behind him, and his face became heavier. I don't know if the decision to leave Zhang Yang in Kamar Taj is right or wrong. Mordo on the side listened and hurriedly said, Master, I said early in the morning that he stayed in Kamar Taj. It is very unsafe. Although Mordo recognized Zhang Yang's talent, but this still does not allow Mordo to change the point of view that in essence he feels that Zhang Yang has a problem. If it doesn't affect Kamar Taj, it's just that, but if it does, Mordo is categorically unwilling to let Zhang Yang stay in Kamar Taj. I can't say that either. Hearing Mordo say this, Wang shook his head and said, maybe there is some misunderstanding in this. Zhang Yang is not like a person of dark power, but I can trust Zhang Yang. Ji Yuyi sighed and did not speak. After all, Zhang Yang, this person, Ji Yuyi observed for so long, and did not find anything abnormal. It's just impossible to see the future of Zhang Yang and detect Zhang Yang's thinking. It actually made Ji Yuyi a little confused. But if Ji Yuyi really wanted to give up such a good seedling, it would be difficult for Ji Yuyi to make this decision in his heart. Thinking about it, Furuchi thought it was better to go find Odin, maybe he would have something to say. Ji Yuyi said to the king, in the past few days, I want to go out, and Zhang Yang's side will be handed over to you first. And try not to let bad things get close to the show, which affects his judgment. King, Master, can you not leave it to me? Don't worry, the cosmic cube should be enough for him to realize for a while. As if seeing Wang's anxiety, Ji Yuyi said to Wang. Wang breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, there is no need for him to teach Zhang Yang anymore. Seeing that Wang Ying was about to leave, suddenly Mordo stopped her. Supreme Venerable. Furuchi stopped. Supreme Venerable, it seems that I mentioned to you before that agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. were investigating us in Kathmandu, do you remember? Mordo said respectfully to Ji Yuyi. Well, I know, they're still there. The things around Kamar Taj, Ji Yuyi still has some attention. Black Widow's group did look for Kamar Taj for a long time. It's just that Ji Yuyi didn't have time to deal with them. Do you need a disciple to come forward and explain? Mordo asked. If they can't find it, they will leave. Ji Yuyi said calmly, seemingly not taking Black Widow's group to heart. Mordo nodded, and then said, by the way, Supreme Venerable. Something happened again in New York. There have been a lot of bizarre explosions recently, and they all seem to have been self-detonated by humans. Ji Yuyi raised her eyebrows. She knew something about this. It seems to be about the desperate virus. The human heart is the most complex thing, and there is no shortage of ambitious people on Earth. However, internal events on Earth have always been handled by the Avengers, so Furuchi will not intervene in advance. For Ji Yuyi, the established timeline, even if Ji Yuyi can stop it, but the time that should happen, will still occur with the timeline, without exception, so it doesn't make sense to help or not. It's just that this person seems to be independent outside the timeline of the universe. Compared to these ancient ones, he is now more concerned about ostentation. You can ask the temple protector in New York to pay a little attention. Ji Yuyi said lightly. Mordo nodded, and after saluting, Ji Yuyi opened the portal and left the temple. Congratulations to His Holiness the Supreme. The next morning, on the training ground, the new apprentice was basically already training, and Saul slowly walked out of the guest hall of Kamar Taj, and walked carelessly to the training ground with the unique steps of the old man. Glancing at the training ground, there was no familiar figure, which made Thor a little puzzled. Yawning, Thor stepped forward and shouted at the mage who was training, Hey, do you know where that Ji Yuyi, Wang, Mordo, and Zhang Yang are? Thor's shout shocked the mages who were training, and everyone stopped their training and looked at Thor with a puzzled face. At this moment, at the back of the crowd, Mordo walked out. Seeing Thor, Mordo frowned, seemingly dissatisfied. However, considering that Thor is an Asgard-injured person, and has just come to Kamar Taj, he did not reprimand sharply, but said to Saul, since the injury is healed, let's come to training. Our training starts at 6 o'clock in the morning, don't be late tomorrow. Training. Hearing Mordo say this, Thor couldn't help but raise his voice and said, training what? Didn't my father ask me to practice? My Grand Prince of Asgard has been training on the battlefield since he was a child, and your training is too small. There was obvious arrogance in Thor's tone, and the loud voice could be heard by almost the entire Kamar Taj. This made Mordo feel a little dissatisfied. Not noticing Mordo's displeasure, Thor scanned the crowd and continued to shout at Mordo, Hey, what about Zhang Yang? Why wasn't he there? Didn't that kid say he was going to fight me? We still have to fight for senior brothers and brothers. Thor's self-righteous remarks made Mordo's face livid. It doesn't matter if Thor is a prince of Asgard. But now Thor is practicing at Kamar Taj after all. Mordo is also a master brother, and now that so many people are watching, Mordo knows in his heart that if he does not teach Saul a lesson, Kamar Taj will be out of order in the future. Thinking so, Mordo directly raised his hand and cast the scarlet chain towards Thor. Thor saw Mordo suddenly move, looked stunned and raised his hand as if he was ready to take his hammer, but at this time Thor suddenly remembered that his hammer was destroyed. Losing the hammer, Thor didn't know how to use Thor's power for a while. He was soon tied by Mordo with a scarlet chain. After struggling a few times, Thor found that this chain was unusually strong, and with his strength, he couldn't even break free. You fool! What have you done to me? Get me out of the way! Thor was furious, yelling at Mordo. Mordo said in a deep voice, looking at Thor and scolding angrily, Do you think you are still the Prince of Asgard? Here is Kamar Taj. Without Mjolnir, you are nothing. Mordo's words were like a thunderbolt on a sunny day, and Thor, who was still struggling, was slammed first. Then it became even more irritable. Thor roared at Mordo, "You stupid mortal. Even if I don't have Mjolnir, I'm still Thor, the future king of Asgard." Mordo frowned, impatiently opened the portal and threw Thor into the space-time passage, shrugged, and said, "You gods should really be weak." The hustle and bustle of the training ground fell silent at this moment. And next door to the training ground, inside Kamar Taj's fighting arena, Wong and Zhang Yang, who heard Soul's roar, couldn't help but glance at each other and shook their heads. Seriously, Thor's temper is really similar to Odin's temper back then. Wong couldn't help but say. So, Odin also came to Kamar Taj back then, and roared like Thor. Listening to Wang's words, Zhang Yang couldn't help asking. Wong shook his head. That's not true, but according to the books in the Kamar Taj library, Odin was also such a violent temper when he was young. Okay, Zhang Yang said with a smile, then looked at Wang and asked, "Did the master say when she will return?" When Zhang Yang came to the fighting arena, Ji Yuyi was not there, but Wang Yi was waiting in the morning. Wang said that according to Ji Yuyi's orders, let Zhang Yang go to the room to meditate first. This thought, another morning. When Zhang Yang came out, Wang told Zhang Yang that in fact, Ji Yuyi had something to go out, and in the past few days, Wang would continue to teach him. So Zhang Yang couldn't help asking. "Soon, I should be back in a few days." Wang looked at Zhang Yang and said, "Master said, let you first familiarize yourself with space magic in the past few days, and practice space magic skillfully." Zhang Yang nodded. This spatial magic is indeed more difficult than basic magic, yes, think about it for a few more days. King Wang Zongju's, Zhang Yang is pretending. Although the king knew that he had a good understanding. But seriously, Zhang Yang shouldn't think that space magic is such a simple thing as medium-level and high-level magic. This god is one of the 6 basic attributes of the universe. What is one of the basic attributes? Understand. Think a few more days. Although the ostentatious understanding is good, it is not so good. Think about it for a few more days to give enlightenment to the space magic. Other magic before is also counted. In the end, it is only basic magic, and it is just a matter of realizing it quickly. But the problem is that this time it's space magic. The more you go to school, the harder it is to learn. Change to an ordinary person, no, just change to a genius. To master the power of space, not to mention spend a lifetime, at least 50 years, right? That is still a genius, in order to practice the proficiency that Ji Yuyi said. Zhang Yang wanted to practice proficiency in a few days. Inexistent. Wang looked at Zhang Yang with an expression of, "You are still too young," patted Zhang Yang's shoulder and said, "It's okay, take your time, don't worry, the power of space is not something that can be skilled overnight." Zhang Yang saluted, "Thank you Wang for your advice." Wang smiled and said, "It's okay." Suddenly, Wang seemed to remember something and asked Zhang Yang, "By the way, the magic book you borrowed from me last time is dedicated to alchemy, how did you read?" Zhang Yang said, "Look." Wang asked, "How do you feel?" Zhang Yang said, "It's not bad, yesterday I tried it and made a sword with alchemy." Wang, "You refined a magic weapon." Although surprised, but fortunately, it was also expected by Wang. It is good to show this guy's understanding itself, alchemy is not a difficult magic. So it's normal for Zhang Yang to learn it after watching it for a day or two. It's just that Wang is a little curious about what sword Zhang Yang has refined. Zhang Yang nodded and said, "Last night, I was idle and bored in the middle of the night, and I always felt a strange energy in my brain, and I couldn't sleep, so I went to look through alchemy, and just saw the refining method of swordsmanship, so I tried it." Wang was a little curious, looked at Zhang Yang and asked, "Is it? So what did you make? Let me see." Zhang Yang shrugged and said, "It's a very ordinary sword, if Wang wants to see it, I'll take it." Zhang Yang said and cast a fetching magic, took the sword from the dormitory and handed it to Wang. Wang didn't want to reach out and take the sword, not wanting Zhang Yang to just put the sword in Wang's hand. Wang felt that the sword seemed to have 1,000 pounds, so heavy that Wang couldn't hold it at all. Falling straight towards the ground, he heard a bang, and the sword plunged straight into the ground. Wang was a little embarrassed. What's so heavy? He didn't give face at all, and he was like muscle weakness. Wang was a little dissatisfied, and at the same time a little embarrassed. He glanced at Zhang Yang embarrassedly, and said embarrassedly, slippery hands, slippery hands. As soon as the words fell, he lowered his head and was about to draw his sword on the ground. When his gaze returned to the sword, Wang was suddenly stunned. This sword, could it be the legendary sword in the stone? I hadn't looked closely before, and Wang hadn't noticed it yet. But now watch this sword standing in the ground. The majesty exuding from that sword and the domineering aura of the king made goosebumps rise all over the place when the king looked at it again. Isn't this the sword of the king recorded in the ancient books? According to the library's collection, if Wang is not mistaken, this sword should be the legendary sword in the stone. According to legend, the sword in the stone first appeared in a church on Christmas Eve. Just as the people had finished confessing and looked up, they suddenly saw a sword stuck into a square stone. Surrounded by gold lettering, whoever draws this sword from the stone platform and is born in England will be king of all England. Later, a man drew the sword. He became a legend that has been passed down to this day, King Arthur. Zhang Yang, did you refine this and this sword? Wang looked at Zhang Yang as if he wanted to confirm. Wang didn't notice at all that his tone was trembling. Zhang Yang nodded and said with a safe and pollution-free look, yes. Now Wang was completely stunned. Buzzing in the head. It was as if a sudden thunder in the flat ground banged Wang in the head. Oh God, man! As if afraid that he would see it wrong, Wang quickly bent down again to look at the sword body. The body of the sword has a string of ancient and bizarre inscriptions. Translated as, only the king can pull his sword out of the rock. Even the inscription is exactly the same. This will make Wang feel 80% sure in his heart. No way, gotta take a look at the library. Zhang Yang, you realize first, I have something. Emergency. Extra urgent. After Wang finished speaking, he ran towards the library without looking back. The running speed was as if there were several fierce beasts chasing him behind him for his life. Urgent and panicked, even Kamar Taj's simplest and most convenient portal king forgot to use. Look at Wang like this. Zhang Yang was a little confused for a while. What's going on? Both hands were paralyzed, and their faces were inexplicable. Zhang Yang pulled out the sword on the ground and sent it back to the dormitory, and when he looked again, Wang had already run away and disappeared. Running so fast, Zhang Yang waved his big hand, and simply realized the power of space first. At the moment, Kamar Taj Library. The king almost crashed into the library, ignoring the tables and chairs that were knocked down, and the king muttered, King Arthur, King Arthur. Soon, following his memory, Wang found the relevant books. Finding the record of the sword in the stone, Wang quickly revisited it, and immediately froze. Oh, dead life. It's terrifying. Zhang Yang turned out, use alchemy to refine the legendary sword in the stone. No, flamboyant. You actually said that this sword is an ordinary sword that you have refined casually. No, this magic weapon can also be called ordinary. Can you refine it casually? This Nima is one of the 10 holy swords, the sword in the stone. No, if you want to say that Zhang Yang is talented and has good understanding, forget it. Alchemy is so powerful. God, is there any reason in this? Is there any humanity? Wang wanted to cry at the moment. Just read a book of alchemy. Zhang Yang was actually able to create a sword in the stone. This is even more powerful and even terrifying magic weapon than the eternal spear in Zhang Yang's hand. Legend has it in ancient Britain. King Arthur was the king of all ancient Britain and was raised by the magician Merlin. But then ancient Britain was destroyed. King Arthur and the sword in the stone are reduced to legends. The sword in the stone, which was rumored to have been endowed with ancient magical powers, also disappeared. But now, this is just an identical imitation sword. Or do you say, is this sword really as rich in ancient magic as the sword in King Arthur's hand? Wang was a little flustered at the moment. He felt that he had to hurry up and talk to senior brother Mordo. This Nima, it's scary. Training ground. After teaching the trainee mage some new magic, Mordo seemed to remember that Thor was still locked up in the time passage by him. Mordo took a deep breath, raised his hand and drew the portal to release Thor. Boom! A dull sound sounded in the air. Thor, imprisoned by the scarlet chain, smashed face down on the ground. Oh, shit, I just dropped for at least 30 minutes. And still with hands tied. As soon as it came out, Thor's furious voice sounded again. This made Mordo frown involuntarily, and sighed helplessly. It seems that you still haven't become honest. Mordo shook his head and raised his hand, ready to let Thor go down again for a while. This time, Thor was honest and busy. No, 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 I think clearly, I will train well. The person who knows the time is Junji. Without a hammer and unable to use the power of Thor, Thor can now only develop obscenely and stabilize the waves. Since that's the case, then you should go to training with the trainee mages. Mordo sighed and withdrew the scarlet chain. Thor got up from the ground and moved his somewhat numb limbs. A little dissatisfied, trainee mage. According to my strength, shouldn't I at least practice with that ancient one? The corner of Mordo's mouth twitched. That's the supreme mage, Kamar Taj's most powerful mage. Her status at Kamar Taj is the same as your father's status in Asgard. Thor shrugged his shoulders and said with an embarrassed look, then I have to at least train with that flamboyant one. Mordo, your brain, at first glance, is not as clever as ostentatious. Stop thinking about it. Mordo frowned. Do you want to continue to fall? Thor shook his head, changed his words, and said busily, actually, I think it's good to train with them. With that, Thor walked into the crowd of trainee mages. Mordo sighed. It's getting harder and harder to teach people. At this moment, a shout came into Mordo's ears, senior brother. It's not good, something is wrong. This scream frightened Mordo. Something happened. What's the big deal? Mordo thought to himself, and saw Wong rushing over in a panic. Something has happened, senior brother. There was no time to salute, and Wong pulled Mordo to the side and quickly said. This made Mordo have a sense of foreboding in his heart. You know, the king has always been the most polite. But now the king was so panicked that he couldn't even care about the number of gifts. Presumably he must have encountered something big to make the king so alarmed. Mordo immediately looked serious. What happened? Wang Yi gasped for 3 breaths in a row, and finally he could speak. Senior brother, Zhang Yang used alchemy to practice the sword in the stone. Zhang Yang used alchemy to create a sword in the stone. What's the big deal? Alchemy is not a difficult spell. It's just that it consumes a little of its own magical energy, so no one wants to learn it. It's not a powerful magic, and it's normal for Zhang Yang to learn. I thought it was something big. Panicked, Mordo breathed a sigh of relief and couldn't help but reprimand Wang Bu. Halfway through the words, Mordo's expression was on the side, as if he realized something, and his pupils suddenly dilated. What did you say? Zhang Yang used alchemy to create a sword in the stone. Mordo exclaimed. Isn't it, Wang, are you serious? Liar. Sword in the stone. Mine a good one. This is too scary. Really, I confirmed it 3 times. You can't go wrong with that. Wang looked at Mordo with an extremely serious expression. It doesn't look like a joke at all. This made Mordo even more surprised in his heart. With the subversion of ancient Britain, the sword in the stone disappeared. So far, few people know how powerful it really is. It's just that there are still ancient legends that simply depict the power of the sword in the stone. The king is unsheathed, and the heavens and the earth change. Where the sword goes, all beings are destroyed. However, with a few words, he can still feel the power of the sword in the stone against the sky. If Zhang Yang really used alchemy to refine this sword. My dear mother, what kind of monster is Kamar Taj? That sword that Zhang Yanglian really has the power of the legendary sword in the stone. As if he didn't believe it, Mordo couldn't help but ask again. At this time, Wang shook his head. I don't know if there is this power, but the sword is indeed exactly the same as the sword in the stone. And that sword, I felt at a glance that it was definitely not an ordinary sword. Mordo took a deep breath and frowned in thought. The more I think about it, the more wrong it is. How could Zhang Yang refine such a legendary holy relic? Mordo said to Wang seriously. Wang, I think you may be mistaken, it may be just like it. Impossible, Wang said categorically. Senior brother, I am absolutely not mistaken. If you don't believe it, see for yourself. Mordo looked at Wang suspiciously. Just look at it, I'm afraid you won't make it. Go. Mordo said that even the mage who was training did not have time to care, so he walked directly towards the fighting arena, and Wang also followed closely behind Mordo. Seeing Wang and Mordo leave in a hurry, Berkeley in the training crowd couldn't help but say, Hey, it is estimated that Zhang Yang has done something shocking again. As a senior brother who had the honor of being able to teach Zhang Yang to start before, Berkeley knew too well the expressions on the faces of Mordo and Wang just now. Just open, no one can calm down. The understanding is so good, what magic has been realized by Yakung again? Berkeley sighed and was about to continue practicing. At this moment, Berkeley heard a low magnetic and arrogant voice in his ear. Hey, that uncle over there, do you know Zhang Yang? Uncle, and that uncle over there. Berkeley frowned, and was about to see who was so small, and when he turned his head, Berkeley looked stunned. Isn't this Thor, son of Odin? Berwick was shocked in his heart, thinking that he had a conflict with Saul during the previous New York War. Berkeley was now weak. After all, Odin's son, he didn't necessarily fight. Moreover, listening to the conversation he had just had with his senior brother, Thor seemed to be staying at Kamar Taj and training with them. This thing is whole, is it really not a giant? Well, what's wrong? Berwick asked nervously. Zhang Yang, that kid, why didn't you train here? Thor asked at Berkeley, the expression on his face quite peaceful. You know, Saul has no impression of Berkeley. Now Thor is full of thoughts about competing with Zhang Yang. As if seeing that Thor didn't remember much about himself, Berkeley breathed a sigh of relief and said to Saul, he is a personal disciple of the Supreme Venerable, so he practiced with the Supreme Venerable. Supreme Venerable, Ancient One, Thor couldn't help but say, it seems that there is such a thing. After finishing speaking, without waiting for Berkeley to speak, Thor suddenly said with some dissatisfaction, why can he practice with Ji Yi, but I want to practice with you here? Because he's awesome. Berkeley thought truthfully in his heart, but shrugged his shoulders and said to Thor, you have to get the approval of the Supreme Mage. Approval. Thor was dissatisfied. I, Prince Asgard, Ji Yi does not recognize me. This, who knows what's going on in the Supreme Mage's mind? As if realizing that he had said the wrong thing, Berkeley quickly shut up. On the side, Thor was still chattering, in Asgard, I am the strongest warrior. Thor raised his chin, a little proud. Seeing that Berkeley ignored him, Thor patted Berkeley's shoulder with his hand and said, oh, by the way, where is that guy training in Zhang Yang? I'm injured now, and I haven't fought him in a fight. Fight, with ostentatious. This piqued Berkeley's interest. Although the flamboyant talent is good, Thor is Odin's son in the end. With the ability to be ostentatious now, maybe the two can really fight a dozen to see who is stronger and who is weak. He usually trains in the martial arts arena next door, but are you going to find him now? Berkeley asked to Saul. Of course. Thor raised his eyebrows and was about to go to the fighting arena. Suddenly, Thor seemed to remember, and walked back and said, oh, by the way, no, I can't go now, because I need a hammer. Want a hammer? What do you want a hammer for? Berkeley asked puzzled. My hammer has my power of Thor, and without a hammer, my power of Thor does not know how to use it. Thor has never been careful, so he speaks more directly. But this blinded Berkeley. Can't exert power without a hammer. Your gods of Asgard are really strange. Berkeley whispered, what a hammer, Thor. With that, Berkeley shrugged and began to practice. See, Berkeley doesn't take care of himself. Shu Saul also felt bored, and watched the mages practice boredly. Like an examiner, he walked and said, oh my god, what are you practicing? Wellness exercises. Is this move of yours useless to fight? Oh, Shet, what is that light that suddenly lit up in your hand? Why is it still sparkling? When Mordo and Wang walked to the arena, they found that it was almost time for lunch break, and Zhang Yang was not in the temple of the arena. It's time to go to eat or rest. So Mordo and Wang waited for Zhang Yang in the temple for a noon, and then Zhang Yang came. As soon as he entered the door, he saw Mordo and Wang, and saluted, senior brother, Wang. Mordo and Wang responded very calmly. Although it seems that there is not much wave on their faces, they can't help but sigh in their hearts. It's finally here. After waiting for 2 hours, if you don't come again, we are all about to fall asleep. After moving his limbs a little, Mordo stepped forward and said to Zhang Yang with an expressionless face, I just chatted with the king for a noon, and the king told me, you seem to have refined a magic weapon. Like a sword. Oh, I refined a sword, I practiced it casually. Zhang Yang said with a smile. The king on the side changed color after hearing this. Can you refine the sword in the stone by playing casually? How do you call someone else's professional alchemy mage to live? Mordu, who was on the side, sneered and shook his head. Who to fool? The sword in the stone has long been silenced. Who do you think you are? Can you refine the sword in the stone by playing casually? Zhang Yang talent is good, although Mordo does not want to admit it, he also has to admit it. However, talent is good and refining the sword in the stone is two different things. Is it? Let the master brother help you see how about that sword. Modu rarely showed a smile and said to Zhang Yang. Oh, good. Zhang Yang nodded. Soon, he used the object magic to take the sword in the stone and put it in front of Mordo's eyes. Mordo looked at the sword in Zhang Yang's hand. His brows couldn't help but furrow. It can't be said that this sword is similar to the 8 or 9 points imitated by the sword in the stone, it is exactly the same. Even the inscription on the sword that was given ancient magic is there. This made Mordo couldn't help but feel a little, this Zhang Yang, shouldn't it be refined with the sword in the stone? However, although this sword does look alike, but the problem is that it can't be said that Zhang Yanglian is the sword in the stone. Zhang Yang, I'll take this sword and take a look. Thinking of this, Mordo said to Zhang Yang. The meaning in the words was obvious, he wanted to take the sword. You know, one of the best verification methods of the sword in the stone is to take it. Because the sword in the stone has a very unwritten rule. Only the king, that is, the owner of the sword in the stone, is worthy of taking up the sword in the stone. Otherwise, no matter how strong you are, you won't be able to hold the sword in the stone. Therefore, the only way Mordo can think of now is to take this sword and try it himself. Okay, give. Listening to Mordo say that he wanted to see, Zhang Yang didn't think much about it, and directly handed the sword over. Mordo stretched out his hand and looked at the hands of Wang Buxin, who shook his head repeatedly, to hold the sword in the stone in his hand. I don't want Zhang Yang to just let go, and Mordo regrets it. Before the I came and could say it, he saw Mordo holding the sword in both hands and falling directly towards the ground, and before Zhang Yang could react, Mordo held the sword in both hands and knelt in front of Zhang Yang with a poof. Quote question mark question mark question mark quote. Zhang Yang, senior brother, what are you doing? Looking at Mordo, who was kneeling in front of him, holding his sword against the ground with his hands and his head bowed. Zhang Yang was a little confused. For a while, Lang didn't understand what was wrong with Mordo. How suddenly he knelt, still kneeling so crisply and directly, without dragging mud and water at all. This made Zhang Yang couldn't help but say, Senior brother, this is not yet the new year, you can't give me such a big gift. Moreover, you kneel for me, this is not very polite, right? Zhang Yang said, with a difficult face. Seriously, Zhang Yang didn't particularly like him as a master brother. But he didn't expect that his senior brother would suddenly kneel for him. It's just that what Zhang Yang doesn't know is that it's not that Mordo wants to kneel for him, but Mordo can't help it. The moment he just let go, Mordo felt that what he was holding in his hands was not a sword at all, but a mountain. Without even reacting to the pressure of Mordo himself, his hands were directly pressed by this sword and smashed to the ground, and he knelt uncontrollably. And the most critical question is, he also can't get up. Not only could he not get up, but Mordo could also feel the pain coming from his hands. 10 fingers connected to the heart. Now, Mordo's 10 fingers were all pressed by the sword in the stone, and the painful Mordo couldn't say a word, his eyes were red, and he could only lower his head to endure the pain. Even with the magical energy in his body, Mordo could not shake the sword in this stone for a single minute. This sword in the stone, it's so heavy. Senior brother, it's okay, you better get up quickly. Seeing that Modu didn't get up for a long time, Zhang Yang was a little unbearable, and quickly said to Modu. Mordo. God knows Mordo's heart collapsed. God. I remember it too, but I can't get up. Looking at Modu, who was responsive, Zhang Yang was a little puzzled, and couldn't help but glance at Wang Dao next to him. Wang, senior brother, what's wrong with him? King. It is estimated that 80% was suppressed by the sword in the stone, and he couldn't get up. Wang guessed, but it's hard to tell Zhang Yang that this sword is very powerful. After all, if Zhang Yang used it indiscriminately with a sword, the consequences would be unimaginable. So he thought about it and said to Zhang Yang, your senior brother should be weighing the weight of the sword. Zhang Yang was stunned, and couldn't help but ask, do you need to kneel to weigh the weight of the sword? Wang, your senior brother has always liked this. The corner of Zhang Yang's mouth twitched, and he said doubtfully, what kind of strange way is this? I thought senior brother was kneeling for me. Wang, how so, you really? Zhang Yang frowned, and asked Mordo with some suspicion, senior brother, do you usually measure the weight of the sword like this? Modu was suffering at the moment, and it was difficult to open his mouth, and nodded with tears in his eyes. I can't say it's because of your sword, I can't afford it. Then senior brother, you continue. Seeing Mordo nodding, Zhang Yang couldn't help but pat Mordo's shoulder. This sentence blindsided Mordo immediately. Go on. No, if I continue, my hands will be wasted. I believe this is a sword in the stone. Really, I really believe it. Modu's heart collapsed, and he endured the pain and trembled and said to Zhang Yang, Zhang Yang, you take the sword away, my legs are numb. Wait for Zhang Yang to pick up the sword. Mordo's hands were finally freed. Mordo quickly put his hands behind his back and stood up from the ground. Hiss, it really hurts. At this moment, Mordo felt the pain coming from his hands, his face was flushed, and his eyes were red, looking like an angry bull. Senior brother, what's wrong with you? Zhang Yang looked at Mordo's strange look and couldn't help asking. Mordo shook his head, unable to say a word in pain. It's really hard to speak, there is suffering to say. So, senior brother, what do you think of this sword? Zhang Yang looked at Mordo and couldn't help asking. After all, before Mordo said that he wanted to help him see the sword, Zhang Yang naturally had to ask Mordo his opinion. Okay. Mordo nodded and reluctantly threw 2 words out of his mouth. What do you think? Can this legendary holy relic work? If it is said that Mordo was still a little skeptical about the sword in the stone before Zhang Yang. At this moment, Mordo was gone with the slightest doubt. In the end, talent is important. Without talent, you don't even deserve a sword. Thinking like this, without waiting for Zhang Yang to speak, Mordo hurriedly said, I still have urgent matters, so I will go first. Saying that, Mordo left without stopping. It's not that Mordo is really in a hurry, but Mordo urgently needs to treat his hands. It's not nice to be held down by a huge mountain. If it weren't for Mordo's magical energy protective body, I was afraid that these hands would be wasted. Seeing Modu leaving, Wang Yi was also busy. Zhang Yang, you practice first in the afternoon, I also have something. After that, Wang also left. Only the ignorant Zhang Yang was left in the room. Why do you say there is an emergency? Watching Mordo and Wang leave in a hurry, Zhang Yang was a little puzzled for a while. I remembered the picture of Mordo suddenly kneeling down when he received the sword before. Zhang Yang frowned. I always felt that what Wang said was somewhat unbelievable. Do you need to kneel to measure the weight of the sword? Rip the calf, right? Could it be that this sword is too heavy? Zhang Yang couldn't help but think, and flicked the sword in his hand, very relaxed. I didn't feel heavy, forget it, weird. With a big wave of his hand, Zhang Yang didn't bother to care anymore. Simply continued to meditate on the power of space. Sanctuary of the Mage. Coming out of the fighting arena, Mordo has been walking forward, and has never taken care of Wang at all. His expression was also extremely serious. It wasn't until he entered the mage temple that Mordo finally couldn't hold back, threw his hands hard twice, shouted, ouch, ouch, in his mouth, and jumped in place in the temple in pain. Senior brother, I said that sword is really a sword in the stone. Seeing Mordo like this, Wang couldn't help but sigh. Deserve it, let you not believe. What I watch, will there be a fake? Who knew that Zhang Yang, that guy, could really refine the sword in the stone? Mordo was short of breath. Heaven kills. If you know, Mordo would not touch that sword anyway. This will make Mordo really regret that his intestines are blue. Hey, Wang sighed. Looking at Mordo like this, I thought about helping Mordo treat it first. Otherwise, it is not a matter of Mordo being in pain all the time. Senior brother, I'll help you see the injury first. It was a normal sentence, and Wang stretched out his hand to see Mordo's hand. I don't want Mordo, but I am a little embarrassed. Looking at the king, he put his hands behind his back and insisted that he would not let the king see. This made Wang a little confused. Senior brother, what's wrong, don't you need treatment? Treatment is definitely treated. But, Mordo looked at Wong and said hesitantly, then you are not allowed to laugh. Wong frowned. What's so funny? Of course, it's more important to treat your injuries. How can this master brother twist and pinch like a lady? Wong couldn't help but think. Seeing Wang's such affirmative gaze, Mordo took a deep breath before taking his hand out from behind. It's okay not to take it out. As soon as he took it out, Wong laughed at that time. I'll go, whose trotters is this? At this time, Mordo's hands were full of redness and swelling visible to the naked eye. The swollen, alive was like two big pig's trotters placed in front of the king, and it was still red and crystal clear. Wong didn't hold back a hoof, and laughed directly at the pig barking. King, Mordo was furious. There was a burst of red and a burst of white on the face. Ha ha ha, senior brother, I'm sorry, your hand is too much like a pig's trotter. Wang Zheng said straight to Mordo, and couldn't help but laugh twice while talking. This made Mordo's face, which was not very good, even worse. In my heart, I hate and jealousy for Zhang Yang. Have you laughed enough? If you laugh enough, come and help me heal my injuries. Mordo endured the emotion of wanting to run away and said to Wang. Wang quickly nodded. Enough laughter, but senior brother, why is your hand swollen like this? Mordo said with a dark face. It's not because you said that I am used to kneeling to test the weight of the sword to become like this, but you also thought about it. God knows that Mordo was stunned when he heard Wang say that. Kneeling to measure the weight of a sword. Why don't I test on my tummy? Wang is really capable of pulling. The most important thing is that Zhang Yang also ran with a serious face to let himself continue to kneel. Mordo almost vomited out a mouthful of old blood at that time. God, can you really stand a master brother of mine kneeling for you all the time? I tell you Wang, if I delay a little longer just now, I'm afraid I can't ask for these hands anymore. Mordo said to Wang with anger. Wang wanted to laugh but couldn't. I could only hold it hard for a while before I came to my senses. With a smile on his face that had not completely dissipated, he said to Mordo, Senior brother, I wasn't helping you solve the siege just now. Unwinding. Come on, junior brother, you can do well, you continue to solve it, your senior brother I guess I will have to cut off my hands. Mordo snorted coldly, sulking. Wang Runjun couldn't help it, and didn't bother to argue with Mordo, but just began to help Mordo treat his injured hand. The air was a little quiet for a while. I don't know how long it took. Mordo eased his state of mind, and then said to Wang seriously, Zhang Yang refined the sword in the stone, we must quickly report to the Supreme Venerable. Hearing this news, Mordo first thought of Ji Yuyi. After all, this is not a trivial matter, and neither Mordo nor Wang can be the master. But, senior brother, the Supreme Venerable is not there. The king spoke with a difficult face. This made Mordo suddenly remember that Ji Yuyi did say that he would go out for a few days last night. Ouch hey, it's really hard. How can Zhang Yang make such earth-shattering big news every time when Ji Yuyi is away? Wang sighed. Zhang Yang, knowing that Ji Yuyi is not there, you will give me less problems. Then do you think that Zhang Yang knows that what he refined is a sword in the stone? Thinking of this, Mordo looked at Wang and asked. Wang shook his head. I guess Zhang Yang should not know, he may have regarded the sword in the stone as an ordinary sword. What a violent thing, Mordo wailed in his heart. Don't look at what magic weapon he uses as a master brother. He Zhang Yang can still be used as an ordinary sword with the sword in the stone, and he is angry. Taking a deep breath, Mordo slowly spoke, since you don't know, don't tell him first. Don't let Zhang Yang use it rashly, if something happens, you and I can't be responsible. Wang nodded. Of course I know this. God, how can a man who can cut the Himalayas in half with magic light, who knows what kind of power the sword in the stone will exert in his hand? Thinking of this, Wang couldn't help but tremble in his heart, and said to Mordo, Senior brother, I think I'll go and tell Zhang Yang later, let him change the magic weapon. When Mordo thought about it, he didn't say anything. The temple was quiet again. In the huge space, only the sigh of the king and the shout of Mordo remained. Hey, I really hope that the Supreme Mage can come back soon. King, you rude man, lighten up. Oh, shit, that place can't be touched. Oh my god, how can I use magic like this, the pain keeps me from concentrating. After treating the wound on Mordo's hand, Wang went to find Zhang Yang. Before leaving, the senior brother said that he could not concentrate because of the pain in his hands, so the afternoon trainee mage training course asked Wang to temporarily replace for a while, and Wang had a headache. Originally, teaching Zhang Yang made Wang feel hopeless in life. Will this also teach trainee mages? You know, Thor is in the lineup of trainee mages. A gifted flamboyant, a proud soul, think about the king and feel that he may be tossed to death. However, there is no way, who makes Kamar Taj short of people now? Hey, another sigh from the soul. Finally walking to the temple of the Kamar Taj fighting arena, Wang felt that he was mentally prepared. Directly pushed open the door. This Zhang Yang was sitting in the house meditating and was not disturbed by Wang's movements. Seeing this, Wang was not bothered. After looking around Zhang Yang, he did not find the sword in the stone. Relieved, Wang sat down opposite Zhang Yang. At this moment, Zhang Yang opened his eyes, ended his meditation, and saluted Wang. Wang tried to keep no expression on his face, so he calmly asked Zhang Yang, "Did I disturb you?" Zhang Yang shook his head. "That's not true." When the words fell, Zhang Yang stood up and moved his muscles to Wang and said, "I thought it out myself. Today's meditation is very effective. I feel that my thoughts are a little faster than yesterday, and I plan to go back to the dormitory to practice for a while." Wang nodded and looked at Zhang Yang absent-mindedly. "It's good if it has an effect. Oh, by the way, Zhang Yang, that's when I want to talk to you about that sword." Sword? Zhang Yang was stunned. "What sword? Oh my god. Zhang Yang, shouldn't you really treat the sword in the stone as an ordinary sword? You forgot about it. Just the sword you refined yourself." The corner of Wang's mouth twitched, and he said depressedly, "Oh, what's wrong?" Zhang Yang suddenly realized and asked Wang. Wang took a deep breath and looked at the tentative expression. "Actually, your senior brother said that your sword is still too heavy, and moreover, it is larger than ordinary swords. You make weapons for convenience and lightness, so I suggest that you don't use that sword for the time being." Hearing Wang say this, Zhang Yang felt that this statement was reasonable, so he said to Wang, "But without that sword, I will continue to use the eternal spear as a magic weapon." "King, it seems that the eternal gun is not too bad when used." Zhang Yang, "Or use the cosmic cube." "King, the cosmic cube seems to be even more powerful." Zhang Yang, "Otherwise, before creating a new weapon, this is to use this sword first. What does Wang think?" "King, I don't know why, Wang always felt that Zhang Yang was pretending. And it's still naked pretense. But Wang also did not have any evidence. This is the most infuriating. At this moment, Wang felt that his heart was cramping. Others don't have a magic weapon. Zhang Yang has 3 when he comes, and he also has an artifact. Take them out and take them out with some shocking treasures. Abominable, jealous, but then again, Wang really didn't think of which magic weapon Zhang Yang was suitable for. If you want to say that Zhang Yang doesn't use it, it doesn't seem to work. Thinking of this, Wang simply changed the topic. Seeing Wang put his hands behind him, he looked at Zhang Yang and said with a serious face, "Zhang Yang, what do you think of magic weapons?" Wang's sudden seriousness made Zhang Yang a little confused. After a brief pause, Zhang Yang quickly came back to his senses and looked at Wang Dao. "I think the magic weapon is for auxiliary mages, tools, can I think so?" Wang nodded and said, "Yes, you are right, it is a tool to assist the mage, so the strength of the mage itself is the most important key." Listening to Wang's words, Zhang Yang nodded, which did make some sense. Looking at Zhang Yang nodding, Wang couldn't help but say again, "You have to focus on improving your own strength. You know, the Supreme Master took a fancy to your past performance and promoted you as a personal disciple, do you understand?" "I know." At this time, Zhang Yang also became serious. "I will remember the words of the king." Wang replied lightly, his face still remaining serious, and said to Zhang Yang, "Before the Supreme Venerable left, let you comprehend the power of space, and I don't know how you realized. Before His Holiness left, let me supervise you, and I felt that I had to take responsibility." As soon as the words fell, without waiting for Zhang Yang to speak, Wang continued, "You have been comprehending the power of space for 4 days now, let me see what you have learned now, just try it in this house." Zhang Yang nodded and was about to make a move, but Wang stopped Zhang Yang, "You can't use the cosmic cube." This made Zhang Yang, who was trying to take the cosmic Rubik's Cube, instantly dispel this idea. Taking a deep breath, concentrating, Zhang Yang began to exert spatial power on the entire temple. I saw Zhang Yang raising his hand and facing ahead. Soon, a crisp cracking sound came from all directions, and the space around Zhang Yang and Wang was like a mirror shattered in half, turning into countless mirrors and quickly enveloping the two of them. Looking at the strange reaction around him, Wang's pupils suddenly dilated, and his heart was shocked. Mirror space. Wang will let Zhang Yang exert the power of space that has recently been newly comprehended, and the reason is that the power of space is difficult. That's why Wang will let Zhang Yang exert the power of space, but if Zhang Yang's ability is still stuck in dimension-breaking teleportation, Wang has reason to say that Zhang Yang is too slack. This allowed Zhang Yang's attention to be diverted back from using the sword in the stone. But what Wang never expected was 4 days. Zhang Yang actually learned Ji Yuyi's peerless mirror space. This made Wang's whole mind blank for a moment. This is the mirror space that the master taught me before, and the master drew a mirror surface and told me that I can use the mirror surface to combine it into a mirror space. It's just that this secret method is a bit difficult, so it took me 4 days to understand it. Looking at Wang standing motionless and silent, Zhang Yang couldn't help but say, "It's good that he doesn't say this," and when he says that Wang's whole mentality is going to explode. Did you also know that this secret method is a bit difficult? You learned it in 4 days, are you too sorry for this difficult word? No, Zhang Yang, is there a problem with your understanding of the word, difficult? What can you learn in 4 days? But of course, then again, if you follow the progress of Zhang Yang, who can comprehend more than 300 magic weapons the night before. It took 4 days to comprehend the secret method of mirror space, which could indeed be said to be difficult for Zhang Yang. Only, if compared with the king. Not to mention that it can create mirror space, it is a mirror, and Wang can't make it until now. Terrifying. Indeed, according to your previous progress, this secret method is a little more difficult for you. However, you can't relax because of the difficulty. Before teaching you a magic, you can draw inferences, but now, the Supreme Venerable taught you how to make a mirror, and it took you 4 days to learn to make a mirror space. For yourself, you seem to have regressed. But nevertheless, Wang knew the gap between himself and Zhang Yang from the first day he taught Zhang Yang. Wang is also used to it. You can't always compare a genius to an ordinary person. Therefore, in the time of teaching Zhang Yang for so long, Wang has mastered experience, and you have to compare Zhang Yang with Zhang Yang himself. Therefore, Wang had such a righteous preaching. After speaking, Wang did not pause and continued to say to Zhang Yang, "Actually, in the final analysis, it is because you put part of your mind on the magic weapon. If it was the original, you should at least comprehend something from the Supreme Mage's mirror now." God knows how helpless Wang was when he said this. Wang's every word seemed to be telling Zhang Yang, "Zhang Yang, Kamar Taj has no one to compare with you except you and the Supreme Mage." Although this statement is true, at Kamar Taj, Wang couldn't find anyone who could balance Zhang Yang now. It turns out that there is also a Mordo. Well, now Mordo has basically been crushed by Zhang Yang, except for Ji Yuyi. Zhang Yang's ability has basically been able to hit all Kamar Taj mages. But the problem is, it's shocking. Didn't he just want to stop Zhang Yang from using the sword in the stone for fear of something going wrong? Why did he come to be hit? Wang didn't understand it at all. Indeed, the master also said this problem to me before, but then it was much better, and today I feel that my brain is very clear, so my comprehension of the power of space has increased a little. As soon as Wang's words fell, he listened to Zhang Yang speak a little happily. When the words fell, he saw Zhang Yang raise his hands. With the movement of Zhang Yang's hand raised, the king felt a violent shaking under his feet, and soon, the entire temple began to tilt, twist, and even deform in front of the king's eyes. In the temple, only the plank standing at the feet of Wang and Zhang Yang was complete. The rest of the place is controlled by Zhang Yang. The entire temple seemed to be made of mud, and it was manipulated and played with casually. Look at the scene in front of you. Wang was completely dumbfounded. Isn't this space warping magic? Zhang Yang also learned. You realize this? Wang opened his eyes wide, looked at Zhang Yang, swallowed his saliva and couldn't help asking. It's quite interesting. But I've tried it before, and the most I can do is change the space in this temple. Zhang Yang answered truthfully. Wang, you're awesome. You win. Sometimes when I think about it, Wang thinks he should leave Kamar Taj. Maybe magic isn't quite for you. Zhang Yang, go to the training ground. You will train with the trainee mages later. No, you will wait to guide the trainee mage training. By the way, share what the Supreme Venerable taught you with the trainee mages. Wang Yuki said weakly. Wang Wei finally understood a problem. Regarding magic, the entire Kamar Taj, except for Ji Yuyi, there are really few people who can guide Zhang Yang. Wang originally wanted to find some stubble for Zhang Yang and let Zhang Yang focus on the power of space. Now, Wang feels that there is no need to find fault. Looking further, Wang felt that he might really consider whether he was suitable to be a mage. So, Wang thought of simply letting Zhang Yang follow him to guide the trainee mage. If you carry it on your body, you can also prevent Zhang Yang from using the sword in the stone. And most importantly, not to be hit. Think about it. Wang felt that this method was the best. Mentoring trainee mages. Isn't this something senior brother Mordo has been doing? Hearing Wang say this, Zhang Yang couldn't help asking. Senior brother is sick, it will not get better for a while. Wang sighed. Sick. Zhang Yang was a little confused. Isn't Mordo still helping him test his sword in the morning? Sick in the afternoon. Well, let's go. Wang said lightly and walked towards the training ground. Zhang Yang replied and quickly followed. Kamar Taj training ground. At this time, Thor sat alone at the front, as if an old cadre, and said to the mage who was practicing. Hey, you guys are too weak to punch, haven't you eaten enough at noon? And you, a big old man punches like a. Hey, I said don't look at me, practice yours. Behind Saul, Wang, who had just arrived at the training ground, glanced at Zhang Yang next to him, pressed his temple with his hand, and shook his head. Almost forgot. There's an Asgard silly X. Wang, you're here. So what about Mordo? As if hearing Wang's sigh, Thor suddenly stood up from the ground and turned to Zhang Yang and Wang and said. Also yawned by the way. What are you doing here? Looking at Thor, Wang's face became much more serious. Look at your practice, Thor said nonchalantly, seemingly sensing Zhang Yang on the side, and picked his chin at Zhang Yang. Hey, mortal, you are also here. Zhang Yang frowned, not wanting to take advantage of Sol's rudeness. Seeing this, Wang on the side hurriedly said, Sol, you came to Kamar Taj to practice, not to see us to practice. Wang's tone was 3 points stern and 7 points helpless. Seriously, seeing Thor, Wang is really having a headache now. This guy, since he called Kamar Taj, he has not regarded himself as an outsider, then that's all. The most important thing is that he completely regards this place as Asgard. What's the difference? Anyway, there are 2 words of practice. Thor glanced at Wang, completely oblivious to Wang's warning. Wang was a little angry and said furiously, how can this be the same? Before he finished speaking, he was interrupted by Saul. Okay, you people here, always use some strange secret methods, but their own ability, none of them can resist. It's not me who said, if you really want to fight with real knives and guns, as far as your fists and legs, my Asgard army is only afraid of 12 accurate. When the words fell, Thor no longer took care of the king, and looked at Zhang Yang and said, Hey, mortal. Do you remember the agreement between us? Zhang Yang frowned and looked at Thor displeased. Are you ready to be beaten now? Thor suddenly smiled. Ha, patted Zhang Yang's shoulder and said, you kid is quite confident. Zhang Yang took a step back, seemingly not liking Sol's rashness. Twisted and pinched, Thor collapsed with both hands and said to Zhang Yang, the agreement between us may be a little later. Seriously, although I can fight you now, but without a hammer, I'm not used to it at all. Zhang Yang shrugged his shoulders and looked indifferent. It's okay. You know, Zhang Yang himself did not take the agreement with Thor seriously. He came to Kamar Taj to learn ability. He has to become an archmage first, and when he becomes a supreme mage, don't say Thor, even Thanos, he will probably have to detour when he sees him. Looking at you seems to be very happy. Why, do you think I can cry you later, so you are happy in your heart? Thor laughed loudly. As if he made a funny joke. In fact, Zhang Yang knew that this guy Thor was a little arrogant and had no brains. It's just that Zhang Yang didn't expect that Thor could be so annoying. Zhang Yang had a cold face and did not speak. On the side, Saul saw that Zhang Yang did not speak, and turned to look at Wang and said, "By the way, Wang, I have to leave Kamar Taj for a while." Wang's brows furrowed even tighter. "Have you forgotten your father's purpose for keeping you here? Or do you not want to go back to Asgard?" Thor smiled and shook his head. "Of course not. You don't have to be so nervous. I'm not really leaving, I'm just going to Nidavel. My hammer is broken, I can't use Thor's power. I still have a bet with Zhang Yang that I have to recreate a hammer." The place of Nidavel was inhabited by a family of dwarves who specialized in crafting artifacts for the gods. Odin's eternal spear and Thor's Mjolnir were made there. Thor was obviously a little unaccustomed to not having a weapon, so it was not for nothing that he wanted to go to Nidavel to recreate a weapon. However, Wang could not agree to Thor's request. "Your status is very special, and you can't get out of Kamar Taj without the order of the Supreme Mage." The king refused Sol's request. "Do you think you place can trap me?" Thor snorted coldly and faced the king. "Please," Wang Shensheng said, his face was not too good. At this moment, Thor was just about to speak, when suddenly a mage stepped forward. "King." Seeing the king, the mage first saluted the king, and then said, "Senior brother asked you to go to the temple, saying that there are guests coming." "Guest? What guest? What guests will Kamar Taj have? Let's go first," Wang thought and said to Zhang Yang. "Zhang Yang, the trainee mages will give you guidance first." Suddenly, as if remembering something, Wang called Berkeley out of the crowd. As soon as Berkeley came out, he saluted the king. Wang pulled Berkeley aside and said, "Berkeley, you remember, keep an eye on Zhang Yang, don't let Zhang Yang use a sword." As soon as the words fell, he left. Berkeley froze all at once. "Can't let Zhang Yang use a sword? What does that mean?" Berkeley thought to himself and walked towards Zhang Yang. Seeing Berkeley, Zhang Yang said, "Senior brother." Just as he was about to salute, he was stopped by Berkeley. "Salute, you don't have to." Berkeley was a little embarrassed at this point. I think that 2 weeks ago, Zhang Yang was only an apprentice he taught, but now Zhang Yang began to guide him, and now if Zhang Yang is allowed to salute himself, Berkeley would really find a hole to drill into. Before the king left, he said that I would assist you. I am afraid that you will not teach apprentices for the first time, Berkeley said to Zhang Yang, and did not tell Zhang Yang the real reason. Zhang Yang didn't think much about it, just nodded. At this moment, a burst of anger interrupted the conversation between the two. "It's really when I can't walk out of this Kamar Taj, right?" The person who spoke was Saul. At the moment, Thor was a little cranky. With a cold snort, Thor turned to look at Zhang Yang and said, "Hey, you boy. Wait for me. When I go to Nidavel and build a weapon, I'll come and fight with you," Thor said, taking the steps of the second uncle and walking away without looking back. Zhang Yang shrugged his shoulders, looking helpless. I can't figure out how he provoked such a hot-tempered guy as Thor. However, Zhang Yang did not pay attention to it, but just said to the trainee mages who were interrupted by Thor's shouting, "You continue to train, you don't need to worry about this." Only then did the trainee mages react and begin their training. Berkeley stood next to Zhang Yang and supervised the mage practice with Zhang Yang, and after Thor left, the atmosphere of the training ground became harmonious. However, this harmonious atmosphere did not last long. About half an hour or so, another burst of fury sounded at the training ground. "What the hell is this place? Can't get out anywhere." Soon, Thor's tall figure walked towards the trainee mage with steps that the 6 relatives did not recognize, and said as he walked, "Hey, do any of you know how this place got out? I'm walking here for 30 minutes. I didn't find the door. Do you Kamar Taj have a door?" Thor has a big voice. Similar to his personality, shouting makes his voice echo throughout the training ground, but no one pays attention to him. At this moment, Thor seemed a little irritable, and he stepped in front of Zhang Yang in 3 or 2 steps and said, "Hey, mortal, is there a door to go out of this place?" Zhang Yang frowned. "Raise your hand and prepare to draw a portal to send Thor, a noisy guy, away." However, because Mordo had used this trick on Thor before, Thor was wary. Saw Thor grabbed Zhang Yang's hand and said to Zhang Yang, "Hey, you guy, don't think I don't know what you want to do. You don't have anything else except such a little trick of jumping beam clowns." Thor's words were tinged with mockery. In Thor's words, Kamar Taj's magic is nothing more than a trick. This made Zhang Yang a little annoyed. With a character like you really won't be beaten when you go out. Zhang Yang really wanted to ask this sentence. After all, since the first day Zhang Yang met Thor, Saul has been offending people and constantly offending people. It was as if no one in the world except his father Odin, he paid attention to it. Beaten. Thor couldn't help but laugh as if he had heard a joke. He looked at Zhang Yang and said to Zhang Yang playfully, "Why, boy, do you want to fight with me? Although I don't have a hammer, I don't need to use my hammer to hit you." Thor said, a little arrogantly boasting, "We Asgardians have been killing enemies on the battlefield since childhood. If you put away your tricks and do it with us, I can guarantee that I can make you cry with one punch." Thor said, clenching his sandbag-sized fist and placing it in front of Zhang Yang. That domineering appearance and arrogant shouting made all the trainee mages on the training ground stop their movements and couldn't help but focus their eyes on Thor and Zhang Yang. For a while, the two people became the focus of attention. A Kamar Taj genius, a prince of Asgard, who wins and who loses. It also attracted the attention of many people. Seeing that the crowd was drawn to him, Thor seemed to enjoy the sensation of being in the limelight. He shouted at Zhang Yang, "How about it? Do you dare to fulfill the agreement between us and fight with me? I don't use my hammer, you don't use Kamar Taj's tricks, we'll use fists. Come and win." Zhang Yang nodded. "You can fight." This made the trainee mages of the training ground a little excited, and spontaneously walked to the sides of the training ground to make room for Zhang Yang and Saul. Berkeley on the side couldn't help but say to Zhang Yang, "Come on." When the words fell, he went to the side to watch the battle. You know, this battle, Kamar Taj's mages are looking forward to it. Chapter 71. As early as this morning, when Thor told Berkeley that he had a fight with Zhang Yang, the mage apprentices on the training ground basically heard it. It's really not that they want to eavesdrop, but there is no way, Thor's voice is too big. Even if you don't want to hear it, there is no way. So from this morning, the mages have been looking forward to Zhang Yang fighting with Thor. One is because they also want to know who will win between Kamar Taj and Asgard. The second word is because the god Thor is indeed a little annoying. Of course, logically speaking, Kamar Taj cannot fight privately. But now Zhang Yang and Saul are not private fights. Thor is now a trainee mage, and Zhang Yang is a counselor. Two people belong to real combat training. Therefore, none of the mages persuaded them to fight, on the contrary, they all hoped that they would fight sooner. "It's finally going to fight," Berkeley muttered a little excitedly, and then, as if remembering something, said to all the trainee mages, Come, open, buy and leave, we bet on property, bet on meal cards, bet on mobile phones, anything can be pressed. Bet on Zhang Yang to win or Thor to win, the opening ah. The supreme mage is not there. Wong and Mordo have an urgent matter. Zhang Yang and Thor are ready to fight, and at this time, it is just right to make a profit. Although Berkeley entered the Kamar Taj practice, the problem is that not all Kamar Taj teachers do not need money. Just like him, a half-hanging mage. If the talent is not bad but timid, or the talent is poor and cannot be learned, at this time, the role of money is great. After all, when the time comes, you have to go out and practice. Kamar Taj does not pay salaries, has no money, and does not have enough magic, so he must not starve to death when he goes out to practice. So, Berkeley is now able to make a little money as a little money. Of course, this has to be hidden from everyone. For example, now, Zhang Yang and Saul fight, it is a perfect time. The only time, miss no more, Prince Asgard vs. Kamar Taj little genius, who loses and who wins the opening ah, the Supreme Venerable is not there, Mordo and senior brother Wong have something to do, private transactions, forbidden to leak ah. Berkeley's words made all the trainee mages anxious. After all, these trainee mages had not had such a big activity for a long time since their practice. In the end, they are only mages who have come in for a year or two, and their minds have not fully practiced, and when they heard Berkeley shouting, they couldn't help but bet. I bet £100 and win with a bang. I bet on a watch, Odin's son wins. I bet, it's just that what they say here, Saul and Zhang Yang can hear every word. I think there will be more people who bet on me to win than on you to win. Thor looked at Zhang Yang with some pride and said. Zhang Yang shrugged. Seriously, in fact, I don't care about this, I only hope that if I win, you will provoke me less. Provoke. Listening to Zhang Yang's words, Thor suddenly smiled and said, oh, you are too arrogant and rude, and you can say such things to the Prince of Asgard. When the words fell, Thor shouted to the Berkeley crowd of onlookers, hey, have you bought it? Remember to buy it all and I won. That leisurely and comfortable look was as if Zhang Yang was already his defeated subordinate now. After speaking, Thor looked at Zhang Yang, moved his muscles, clenched his fists, and waved in front of Zhang Yang. See, my fist, you little body, don't cry when you get punched. Or. Thor raised his eyebrows and looked at Zhang Yang and said, you say two good things to me now, I can still tap, poof. In fact, from the beginning, Thor did not take the battle with Zhang Yang seriously. Most likely, because Zhang Yang looks much thinner than Thor, Sol's attitude will be so arrogant and talkative. It's just that what Sol never expected was that he hadn't finished talking halfway through his words just now, and Zhang Yang's punch came out. And it was hit on his stomach. Thor felt a tumble in his stomach with this punch, and almost couldn't resist throwing out all the food he had eaten in the past 2 days. If it weren't for the fact that he fought from childhood to adulthood, and Odin's divine power blessing. I am afraid that if this punch goes down, Thor can be killed by Zhang Yang. This made Thor a little confused, looking at Zhang Yang's face that was close at hand, and thought without pretending in his heart. This kid, his fist, so hard. Punching Zhang Yang abruptly, Thor would finally stop chattering, he just froze, and then glared at Zhang Yang and said, you boy, sneak attack. Who let yourself talk a lot, don't you know that villains all die of talking too much? Zhang Yang shrugged his shoulders, did not give Thor time to breathe, and the second punch smashed at Sol again. At this time, Thor had learned the first lesson, obviously defensive, and raised his hand to resist Zhang Yang's blow with his elbow. Thor was originally a warrior, often went to battle, and had divine blessings. Therefore, in terms of physical strength and endurance, it is indeed better for Kamar Taj, and many mages are more than 1 or 2 times. Thor originally told Zhang Yang to fight with his fists just because he could not exert the power of Thor, so Thor wanted to find a way to fight that was beneficial to him, but what he never expected was that after these 2 moves with Zhang Yang, Thor found out. There is a ghost advantage. Zhang Yang is not only a mage, but also a meat method afterburner. Boom! Saw Zhang Yang jumping up and smashing a punch at Sol. After Sol dodged, Zhang Yang's punch smashed a fist mark on the ground. At this moment, Thor was stunned. Is this a mage? This feels like a fight with a scaled-down version of the Hulk. Thor couldn't help but roar. Doesn't the book say that the physique of mages is basically the physique of ordinary people? This Nima is called an ordinary person. Berkeley, who was watching Zhang Yang and Sol on the side, heard it and said to Sol with a smile, who told you? The books are all made up. Sol, my history books of Asgard, you tell me that they are made up. Are you pulling the calf, are you? But, the flamboyant physique and strength seem to be really not ordinary people. Can you confront yourself, and you can still force yourself into continuous defense? No, it seems that the power does not prevail. Thor thought to himself, and after directly smashing the gap between him and Zhang Yang with a punch, he said to Zhang Yang, you wait, you wait. This made Zhang Yang a little confused, and he couldn't help but say to Sol, what are you going to do? Thor shook his head and said, I don't think it's okay to fight like this, it's too slow, and I'm not comfortable if I don't have anything on my hands. Let's fight with weapons. Zhang Yang frowned, and for a while he didn't know what trick Thor was going to play, and said to Sol, we Kamar Taj only have magic weapons. Thor said impatiently, isn't it a weapon if you don't use any magic energy of yours to activate it? Publicity. Troublesome. Thor looked at Zhang Yang and couldn't help but say, why, are you afraid that you won't be able to beat me with a weapon? As soon as the words fell, Thor raised his chin. Zhang Yang shrugged his shoulders and said with a look of indifference, that's okay, if you want to take a weapon, take a weapon. Thor nodded, okay. When the words fell, Thor asked the dumbfounded trainee mages on the side, hey, what kind of magic weapon are you, take it. Thor's words made the trainee mages who were unknown on the side, so they had not yet seen the results, react. Want to be armed? There is a fighting arena next door to the weapon, but the problem is that none of us can enter the fighting arena, only Zhang Yang can enter. Berkeley said to Thor. You guys break the rules. Thor said, dissatisfied. Zhang Yang glanced at Saul, raised his hand to cast the portal, and said to Saul, what do you want to pick? Thor glanced at Zhang Yang and walked in with uncle steps. But after a while, Thor came out with 2 huge maces and said to Zhang Yang, that's it. For a while, the training ground boiled. I'll go, isn't that the biggest and heaviest magic weapon of Kamar Taj? This magic weapon is said to have been left here by a giant beast in a different dimensional space, and if these 2 sticks go down, can Zhang Yang survive? If you use magic, maybe it's true, but if you don't use magic, these 2 maces should have no weapons that can move. Seeing that Thor took Kamar Taj's biggest magic weapon, for a while, many mages were a little stunned. This time, Thor was obviously a little proud. Okay, I have chosen, just use these 2 maces. Berkeley. Trainee masters. God, isn't this rippy? 2 maces of such a size. Any stick looks like it can shoot Zhang Yang to death. The most important thing is, you can't use magic yet. Berkeley, I increase the weight, I bet on Saul to win. Berkeley, I also increase the weight, I also bet on Thor to win. Berkeley, can I change it? I also want to bet on Saul to win. For a while, all the trainee mages looked at Berkeley and wanted to change their bets, and in their hearts, this duel began with Thor taking out the 2 maces that were claimed to be the most heavyweight weapons of Kamar Taj, and Zhang Yang lost. They didn't know that Zhang Yang had magic weapons on him, and each one was an artifact. Seeing that he had one in the hearts of everyone, plus 2 huge maces in his hand, Thor hummed, raised his little chin and said to Zhang Yang, if you admit defeat now, the big deal is to admit that you Kamar Taj are just some fist embroidery legs, otherwise, if I go down with this stick, you will die. Thor shouted, his face full of pride. In fact, Thor took out these 2 maces just to scare Zhang Yang. Although he had a festival with Zhang Yang, he also got along with him, and Thor felt that Zhang Yang, this kid, the person was not bad, and it was quite fun, so he wanted to tease Zhang Yang for a while. But for Kamar Taj and these mages' flower fist embroidery legs and breaking rules, Thor really dislikes it. You choose, it's my turn. Seeing that Thor chose his weapon, Zhang Yang also began to take his own magic weapon. Thor chose a large mace, weighed it, and Zhang Yang decided to take one that could be confronted. Casting the magic of extraction, Zhang Yang soon took out the magic weapon he had thought of, the eternal spear. Thor seemed to have completely forgotten that he had seen Zhang Yang take the eternal spear before. It's just that Thor didn't figure out why the eternal spear was still there. Wrong, that's not the point. The point is that I just took 2 maces, is it too much for you to take out my great Asgard's artifact eternal spear? Saul, Zhang Yang, in fact, you don't have to be so serious. For some reason, the moment Zhang Yang took out the eternal spear, Thor felt a little panicked. Perhaps because this is Odin's thing, even if Odin is not there, it is enough to deter Thor, which will make Thor's voice obviously much smaller. Looking at the glittering eternal spear in Zhang Yang's hand, Thor threw the 2 maces in his hand to the ground, making 2 loud bangs. Don't fight, this girl still fights a ghost. Watching Saul throw his weapon, Zhang Yang couldn't help but be stunned. You admit defeat. Admit defeat. In my dictionary, there is no word for admitting defeat. Thor snorted coldly, pointing at the eternal spear in Zhang Yang's hand. You can't use this thing, change it. Every time I see this eternal gun, I think of when my dad was a kid and it chased me. Publicity. At Soul's request, Zhang Yang changed another magic weapon. This time, Zhang Yang took out the cosmic Rubik's Cube. Strictly speaking, the power in the cosmic Rubik's Cube is not magic, and since Saul Lipey chose 2 maces of giant beasts, then Zhang Yang doesn't mind using the power of the cosmic cube. Okay. Zhang Yang held the cosmic cube in his hand and looked at Thor and said, Saul, so serious. You are really too serious. Not only seriously, you are excessive. No, flaunt you as an individual. You hit me with treasures stolen from my Asgard. Thor asked rhetorically. Is it suitable? I'll just ask you, is this appropriate? If it weren't for the fact that there was no Mjolnir, Thor really wanted to throw the hammer over and stun Zhang Yang. Anyway, I don't know why, Thor always feels that Zhang Yang is a deep pit. This doesn't work, That's not okay, are you sure you're a god? Seeing Thor like this, Jongyang was helpless. Can I be blamed for this? Thor looked at Jongyang with a confused face. No, I'll fight you. You either take the eternal gun or the cosmic cube. Isn't that too much? The point is, all you take is my Asgard stuff. No, you change again. Thor waved his hand. Jongyang frowned and took out his last weapon. The sword he refined casually. What kind of sword is this? Perhaps he was frightened by Jongyang's two artifacts in front of him, and seeing Jongyang take out a sword that he didn't recognize, Saul couldn't help but ask. I made it myself, Jongyang said truthfully. The sword you refined yourself. Thor was a little suspicious, staring at the sword in Jongyang's hand up and down no less than 3 times, clapping both hands, and said to Jongyang. I think so. Just this sword. Very good. Thor had a smile on his face and thought unpretendably. How good can the sword he made be? Looking at this sword as ordinary, it is estimated that it is not very good. Although he thought so, Thor said, I feel that your sword is very similar to my mace, and it has a fight. When Thor said this, Berkeley on the side couldn't stand it. Berkeley stepped forward 2 steps and couldn't help but say to Thor, how can this sword be able to compete with the mace in your hand? Look at the volume is not the same. Berkeley's words made the mages feel reasonable, and they couldn't help but say to Thor. Thor, that's too much. That is, victory is not martial. I think it's better for Jongyang to use the eternal gun. For a while, the training ground became noisy again. This made Thor a little embarrassed. It's not that Thor is worried that he can't beat it, but that the eternal spear and the cosmic cube Thor have seen it. It's powerful. Is this unclear? Will you lose? In this way, I will use a mace, this will always work. Thor said, randomly pointed another mace to the ground, brandished the mace in his right hand to try the feel, looked at Jongyang and raised his eyebrows. Jongyang was stunned and hesitated. After all, the sword in his hand was refined by himself. But the mace in Sol's hand can also be regarded as a treasure, this sword will not be broken after 2 cuts, right? Thinking of this, Jongyang was also a little panicked for a while. Seeing this, Sol on the other side couldn't help but say, also Sammy, how can you be like a lady? I don't think so, your weapon is inferior in terms of body size compared to mine, you can use a mace, change to a small one. Jongyang said, casting a spell to open the portal. Jongyang is not stupid, this kind of unfairness that discerning people can see, he can't do it. Okay. Thor didn't say anything, walked in and changed to a normal-sized mace. After all, Thor was just thinking of a little joke, and it was not his style to take advantage of such a big advantage. This will work, right? Thor asked, holding up the mace in his hand. Yes, I'm ready, let's fight. Jongyang nodded, raised his sword and said to Thor. Thor stared sharply, and also raised the mace in his hand. The big war is imminent, the fair fight. Because I have experience in fighting Jongyang. This time, Thor got serious. For a while, the Kamar Taj training ground was also quiet, and even the air was heavy. All the mages were looking forward to a 2-man battle and equally expecting to learn something. Berkeley's mood was equally tense at this time. In any case, Kamar Taj must not lose to Asgard. Thinking so in his heart, at this moment, Jongyang had already waved the sword in his hand. A sharp sword light was shining into Berkeley's eyes by the sunlight. It was at this time that Berkeley suddenly remembered a sentence that Wong said, you remember, you must not let Jongyang use a sword. Can't let Jongyang use a sword. Finished. Berkeley panicked in his heart and was about to stop it, but it was too late, because at this time Thor had already swung his mace and rushed towards Jongyang. That imposing look is really worthy of being a general who has been fighting on the battlefield since he was a child. With a natural kingly demeanor. A loud roar. Ah! World shaking. Plus Thor's red robe fluttering in the wind. At this time, Thor was like a wolf and rushed towards Jongyang. At the moment when he was close to Jongyang, Thor waved the mace in his hand and smashed towards Jongyang. Jongyang raised his backhand, and the moment the sword hit Sol's mace. Just listen to the boom. The mace in Thor's hand was split in half, leaving only one handle in Thor's hand. Sol, Berkeley, mages, quote exclamation mark, are you so bad? Thor was furious and cursed. When he was angry, Thor directly raised the huge mace on the ground and smashed it at Zhang Yang. Zhang Yang looked flustered, shouted in his heart that it was not good, and then blocked with his sword. Boom! A crisp crash sounded. At the same time, the expressions on the faces of the onlookers changed from panic to shock. No way! Zhang Yang's broken sword actually carried the attack of Soul's giant mace. And it hasn't broken yet. The quality of this sword is really strong. At this time, Zhang Yang was also a little surprised in his heart. The sword I made is so resistant to smashing. Zhang Yang thought to himself. I don't know if I don't fight, I'm scared by a dozen. Originally, Zhang Yang felt that this sword was made by himself casually, and it should not be very top-notch. I didn't expect to be able to resist the attack of this giant mace. This time, Zhang Yang was a little more confident. Holding the sword in his hand, Zhang Yang began to counterattack. I saw Zhang Yang holding a long sword and swinging it at Saul. Although Wang Zhao's military body boxing before made Zhang Yang indeed have an epiphany of a lot of fighting skills, Zhang Yang still didn't know much about the use of weapons, at least not as much as Saldo. Zhang Yang's moves can be seen at a glance as a layman, cluttered and full of loopholes. But even so, Thor was still beaten by Zhang Yang and retreated one after another. This made the onlookers a little confused, and they couldn't understand it for a while. It stands to reason that Thor has been fighting since he was a child, proficient in various weapons, fighting arts, and now there is a super large mace. How should he prevail? But now why does it seem that Zhang Yang has always had the upper hand? Although the onlooker mages did not understand. But the problem is, Thor understands. At this moment, Thor was a little annoyed, more grievances after being deceived. Thor always felt that the sword in Zhang Yang's hand was definitely not a sword that he had refined himself. You know, by now, Zhang Yang's sword has resisted Soul's 5 hammers. Such a big mace, Thor smashed it down with both hands. Not only is it okay to show that sword, Thor also felt a strong force that shook his whole body numb. And that's not the most critical. The most important thing is, Zhang Yang when that guy counterattacked. It may be because Zhang Yang does not know any swordsmanship or moves at all, and his moves are unpretentious, and he uses this sword as a knife to slash. If this method of slashing is really changed to someone else, it will definitely be beaten without 2 moves. But the problem is, Thor feels. The flamboyant slash simply exerted the power of this sword to the extreme. Every time Soul's mace hit it, it shook Thor's brain. It was as if Zhang Yang cut off not the mace in Thor's hand, but Thor's head. This made Thor a little devastated. Obviously, he can see all the flaws in Zhang Yang's body, but the problem is that he can't fight back. Could it be that this is what the Earthlings often say about beating the teacher to death? This made Thor a little confused whether Zhang Yang was really slashing or whether this sword should be played like this. Now Thor only feels that he is getting more and more angry, especially when he is pressed by Zhang Yang step by step. Thor felt that his aura was almost suppressed by Zhang Yang. Boom! With a loud bang, Saul, who used his mace to resist a sword in his hand, turned red with his face, and his strength to eat milk was used. Click! The sound of cracking sounded in Thor's ears. Thor only felt a weight in his body. I don't know if it was the power of Zhang Yang or the power of the sword, but it was so hard that Soul's feet stepped on the ground and cracked quickly. Thor was stunned. Is Zhang Yang's strength so great? However, without waiting for Saldo to think, Zhang Yang raised his sword and stabbed towards Saul. Thor was stunned and wanted to block the power of Zhang Yang with his mace. This will make Thor realize that because he has resisted too many ostentatious attacks before, this will not only make his mind buzz, but most importantly, his hands seem to be numb. This crispy and numb feeling made Thor a little unable to hold the huge mace in his hand. With a pop, the mace fell to the ground with a loud noise. And Zhang Yangjung's sword stabbed towards Saul, and the speed was quite fast. Thor was startled, jumped up in the air, and was preparing to make a 360-degree horizontal turn and kick off the sword in Zhang Yang's hand with his foot. However, it was also the moment when Thor raised his leg and took off into the air. Zhang Yang's sword pierced Saul accurately and unmistakably with the momentum of lightning. Thor only felt a tingling pain coming from all over his body. Wait a minute, this familiar feeling, this precise location. Thor was stunned. This sword seemed to pierce Thor's brain, and also made the training ground quiet at this moment. All the mages looked at Thor with their mouths wide open. No, to be precise, looking at the sword that Thor had stuck in his body. Even Thor himself couldn't help but open his mouth and turn to look at the sword stuck in his ass. Same location, same pain. Thor seemed to understand something at this moment, which made his eyes widen, and then slowly raised his head to look at Zhang Yang. That hole in Lao Tzu's ass last time was what you poked, didn't you? After a while, Thor was furious, and then roared. Berkeley, mages. Last time, could it be that Zhang Yang also poked Sol's ass? Thor's words made the onlookers stunned, and their faces were puzzled. The corner of Zhang Yang's mouth twitched, and then he drew his sword hard. With Zhang Yang drawing his sword, Thor trembled, only feeling his butt tightened, and said angrily, "Lie in the groove." Thor gritted his teeth. "Why the air you poking in and pulling out? Don't give a reminder at all. Zhang Yang. Otherwise, I'll poke it in again and remind you again." Sol clattered his teeth. "Can I give you 2 pokes in the ass?" Zhang Yang. "Can't." Thor gritted his teeth. "Then you keep staring at my ass every day." Zhang Yang. I didn't mean to believe you. Quote. Publicity, you beast. It turns out that the person who poked Lao Tzu's ass last time was you. No, the point is that you poked it last time, forget it, and now you poke it again. You poking is not enough. Poke addicted. Twice, really twice. You still poke the same place twice. Everyone fights civilized fights. Isn't it too much to poke me in the ass all the time? At this moment, Thor was a little up, and his flushed face and the blood that suddenly rushed to the top of his head made Thor a little out of control. Thor had red eyes, and his neck was bulging. Like that, he was obviously angry. God, change someone to poke your ass twice, are you on fire? Fierce eyes. Thor picked up the mace on the ground, clenched his hands tightly, jumped up in the air, and smashed it at Zhang Yang from top to bottom. Not good. Seeing this, Berkeley exclaimed. This sound made the hearts of all the onlookers tighten. As an Asgardian, Thor has Odin's blessing and divine power to protect him, even without the hammer bonus. The height of Sol's jump on the spot is definitely more than 5 times that of ordinary people. That height, coupled with Sol's strength, the moment he smashed down against Zhang Yang, you can imagine how strong the power would erupt. Sol is in a hurry, and he doesn't plan to show mercy to his subordinates at all. It's over, it's over. Berkeley muttered. His heart was anxious and panicked, and his feet were soft with fright. At this moment, suddenly, I only heard a boom. For a while, the situation changed. At the moment when Thor jumped, a bolt of thunder connected to Thor's body. For a while, Thor's eyes and whole body were filled with blue thunder, and there was a sound of nourishment in the air. All the onlookers were stunned. Is this the legend, Thor's power? Oh my God! Berkeley exclaimed. Run. Berkeley seems to want to remind Zhang Yang to run fast. This stick you may not be able to resist. Only, too late. It won't help to stop it now. Because Thor fell much faster than he could jump, with a powerful thunder and lightning power. Right now, the mace in Thor's hand is about to hit Zhang Yang. At this moment, all the mages were staring at Thor, their eyes moving with the mace in Thor's hand, until the mace in Thor's hand hit the sword in Zhang Yang's hand without sparing any room. Thor roared from the training ground, "Show you beast." Boom. The forces converged, and an invisible energy spread out in the fighting arena. For a time, the yellow sand of the fighting arena rolled in, burying Sol and Zhang Yang. The mages were so anxious that they kept patting the sand in their eyes, as if they wanted to see the result quickly. Watching the yellow sand in front of him disappear little by little, finally, his eyes gradually became clearer. The mages were stunned to see the originally raised fighting arena collapse into it at this moment. The center of the collapse. Zhang Yang raised the sword in his hand to block the mace in Thor's hand. The two were frozen in the middle of the fighting arena. A few seconds later, I saw the huge mace in Thor's hand shattered into pieces and fell to the ground, turning into a pile of scrap iron. Sol, Berkeley, mages. It's not ostentatious. You're sure that this sword is refined by yourself, ordinary sword? Looking at the pile of scrap copper and rotten iron on the ground, Berkeley and the mages were a little confused. Not only are they confused, but Thor is also confused. The power of thunder and lightning, plus the mace from the giant beast of another dimension, smashed down against Zhang Yang this time. Zhang Yang is okay, his sword is also fine, on the contrary, Thor's mace is shattered. In addition to being able to say that the sword in Zhang Yang's hand is too awesome, what else can it say? This will even scare Thor out. The previous anger were all thrown away. Looking at the shattered mace on the ground, Saul couldn't help but say, Zhang Yang, your sword is really an ordinary sword. As soon as Thor's words fell, suddenly, a noisy sound sounded in the training ground. Oh my god, what is that on Zhang Yang? Look at it, open the sword in your hand. Oh my god, the sword is glowing gold. In magic, golden light represents the holy light, which means supreme. This noisy sound attracted Thor's gaze. Thor raised his hand and froze for a moment. Now, Zhang Yang closed his eyes. His thin figure stood in place, standing in that hazy and confused layer of air. In his hand, the so-called ordinary sword was shining brightly at this moment. It's a golden glow. It began to emanate from the string of inscriptions on the sword body, and soon, the golden light wrapped the sword body, and that golden light also poured into Zhang Yang's body. Zhang Yang's body was wrapped in this golden light. The originally thin figure was illuminated by this golden light, which made Thor feel a little fearful. Powerful energy surged in Zhang Yang's body. Kamar Taj, who was originally windless, rolled up a strange breeze at some point, blowing his open hair and blowing the monk's robe on his body. This feels, let Thor have a hint of foreboding in his heart. Zhang Yang, what are you doing, shouldn't we finish fighting? Thor looked at Zhang Yang, who was standing in front of him with his eyes closed at the moment, and couldn't help asking. Thor didn't notice that his voice was shaking a little. To be honest, this is not Thor's intention, but I don't know why Thor now has an invisible pressure in his heart. This pressure made Thor couldn't help but his voice began to tremble. It's just that Zhang Yang doesn't seem to have taken Li Sol, and the energy of Zhang Yang's body is still increasing, and that golden light is also flowing on Zhang Yang's body. Thor was a little confused at this time. He felt that he might have smashed the wrong stick just now. How did he feel that he smashed Zhang Yang's stick now, as if he had smashed Zhang Yang into the light? Zhang Yang, we have something to say. Thor looked at Zhang Yang with some embarrassment. At this time, Thor's ass was still bleeding, but he couldn't care about it at all. Thor always felt that at this time, he might need to run. He probably messed with the wrong person. Thor thought and quickly turned around. At this moment, a deep voice was heard behind Thor, Sword of the King, unsheathed. Unsheathed? What kind of stuff? This sword of yours wasn't unsheathed when you just fought me. What happens to the unsheathed? Are you kidding me? Thor couldn't help but think, turning his head hesitantly. I saw that at this moment, Zhang Yang suddenly opened his eyes, and a golden light overflowed in Zhang Yang's eyes. Zhang Yang held the sword in both hands, slowly raised the sword in his hand, and as Zhang Yang raised the sword, the golden light on the sword became stronger and stronger. No, it's not that the golden light on the sword is getting stronger and stronger, rather, the sword in Zhang Yang's hand is getting longer and longer. Right, Thor was not mistaken, the sword in Zhang Yang's hand was getting bigger and longer. As the golden light became stronger and stronger, the sword in Zhang Yang's hand pointed straight at the sky. At this glance, Thor saw that the sword had at least turned into a 100-meter sword. This, publicity, are you going to amplify the move? Me, it's excessive, let's just fight. Do you need to amplify the move? Thor thought to himself, but at this moment, the sword in Zhang Yang's hand seemed to be about to cut at Thor. At the same time, Zhang Yang shouted 5 words out of his mouth, victory and oath. With Zhang Yang, this roar ended. Zhang Yang waved the long sword with golden light that was 100 meters long and slashed at Saul. Huge amounts of energy tear the air. The sword light appeared, and the sword aura was awe-inspiring. This blow came from above, setting off a wild hurricane and smashing straight away. Everywhere the long sword went, everything was destroyed, and with a loud boom, the entire Kamar Taj couldn't help but tremble. This sword, Zhang Yang cut out 100 meters, and split the training ground into 2 halves within 100 meters. A wide, long gap was left in the middle. Berkeley. Mages. Saul. Mom. At this moment, Saul, who escaped from the 9 deaths under Zhang Yang's sword, looked at the endless gap not far away. Looking at the mess of Kamar Taj. Look at the collapsed Kamar Taj building. Looking at the ground that was shattered by Zhang Yang's sword, he was so frightened that his eyes were about to fall out. Opening his mouth wide, Thor patted his frightened little heart. At this moment, he could even feel his own hands trembling. Kill crazy, kill crazy. Zhang Yang Shentai, kill crazy already. No, too serious, really, bro, you are too serious. Let's just fight, it's really a fight, just a casual discussion. Why don't you put a big trick on me? If you go down with this sword, I may have to lie down for half a year, right? No, at this moment, the more Thor thought about it, the more wrong it became. He felt as if he had been played. God, doesn't it mean that this is just an ordinary sword? Sol Mullen looked at the black smoke that Zhang Yang's sword left on the ground, and the Kamar Taj building destroyed by Zhang Yang. This Nima is called ordinary. Or did you make it yourself? I don't know why, Thor suddenly felt that it was actually good to be poked in the ass twice. It's true, if you just put up with it, maybe you won't have this sword. Swallowed saliva. Thor was half frightened, and at this time, not only Thor was surprised, but the onlookers were also stunned. The one who was shocked was stunned. Originally, they thought that Zhang Yang was a genius, but now they found that Zhang Yang is not only a genius but also a future supreme mage. At this time, everyone's eyes brushed together without exception, and she brushed and looked at Zhang Yang very uniformly. Hiss. Terrifying. In the astonished eyes of everyone, the golden light on Zhang Yang's body faded, and the sword in his hand also returned to its original state. Looking at the mess, as if Kamar Taj had just been bombed, Zhang Yang himself was also a little stunned. This sword, Zhang Yang couldn't help but look down at the sword in his hand. Zhang Yang didn't seem to expect that the sword in his hand seemed to be quite powerful. Although this power cannot be compared with the perverted artifact of the infinite rough stone, it should be quite bluffing. Zhang Yang thought to himself, and suddenly saw Kamar Taj, who was cut into a mess by himself. What if the Supreme Venerable comes back? Thinking about it, Zhang Yang couldn't help but be stunned. I can't think of any good way for half a day. Wave your hand, forget it, don't care, the Supreme Mage always has a way. Thinking so, Zhang Yang raised his head and set his gaze on Sol, who was sitting on the ground not far away. So he walked towards Thor. At this time, Thor also seemed to have discovered Zhang Yang's movements. Seeing Zhang Yang coming, Thor quickly stood up from the ground, without the slightest expression in his expression. Thor. Zhang Yang looked at Thor, as if he wanted to say something, but hesitated again. Just now, when Thor smashed down with a mace and blocked Zhang Yang with his sword, he suddenly felt that there was a huge energy in the sword in his hand echoing with some kind of magical energy in his body. Zhang Yang himself didn't know what was wrong, and the strange magical energy in his body seemed to be ignited. So there was the blow of victory and oath. Although Zhang Yang really didn't like Thor, but Thor didn't do anything after all. It was almost the same to teach Sol a lesson. It seems there was no need to kill him. But look at Kamar Taj like this. Zhang Yang seemed to be wondering if he had exerted too much force just now. Fang Yang. Just when Zhang Yang hesitated to say something to Sol, Thor suddenly called out Zhang Yang's name. Zhang Yang was stunned, looking at Thor's extremely serious face, and his heart was flustered. Don't, this one, isn't it over? Zhang Yang thought to himself, silently clenched the sword in his hand again, slowly raised. At this moment, suddenly, Sol's expression changed, looking at Zhang Yang, covering his butt with both hands, and crying on his face, I was wrong, senior brother. Publicity. Kamar Taj. Inside the temple. Wong looked at Mordu, who looked serious, and couldn't help but be stunned. Senior brother, the descendants of Master Merlin really want to come to Kamar Taj. Mordo nodded. It said that it would arrive in 3 days. Mordo's words made Wang's brows frown. Kamar Taj has always been rarely isolated from the outside world, so when the mage said that Kamar Taj was coming as a guest before, Wang really thought about it for a long time, but he didn't think that it would be the descendants of Master Merlin. You know, Mage Merlin is extremely famous in the mage world and is a very strong wizard. Before Ji Yuyi, the last supreme mage was him. At that time, the Merlin mage family led by Merlin was equivalent to today's Kamar Taj in the mage world. But later, since the spirit body of Mage Merlin went to the Eternal Emperor, the Mage Merlin family disappeared. Today, the Merlin mage family has become a legend in the mage world, a mysterious legend. Since Mage Merlin stepped down as Supreme Mage, the Merlin mage family has never participated in any mage exchange meetings again, and no one has even participated in the Supreme Mage competition, so until now, no one knows the true strength of the Merlin family now. But no one in the mage world had ever dared to underestimate any mage who had a slight relationship with the Merlin mage family. You know, Mage Merlin is a very good and very strong mage. It is said that Morgan Le Fay, once the most powerful witch in the history of the earth, was her apprentice. So you can imagine how powerful Mage Merlin is. Of course, Wong knew that some of these were history books that combined magic, and the other part was known by Ji Yuyi when he occasionally chatted with Wong. Even Furuichi had awe in his tone when he talked about Mage Merlin. It's a really weird thing. Wong sighed. For some reason, after hearing this news, he was always a little uneasy. Although it is indeed normal for mages to communicate with each other. Kamar Taj has indeed come to many mages. But the problem, people from the Merlin mage family came, this is a little abnormal. After all, they were almost inactive in the mage world, and suddenly said that they were coming to Kamar Taj. If you make an abnormality, there will be a demon. That's why Wong is so anxious. Yes, I don't know when the Supreme Venerable will return. Mordo on the side also sighed, his worries seemed to be the same as Wang's. Looking at Wang's anxious expression, Mordo shook his head and said to Wang, seriously. Mordo was going to say something. However, just after 3 words were spoken, I only heard a loud noise that shook the earth. Rumble. Before Mordo and Wang could react, they were ejected by a strong energy. This energy destroyed the temple directly. A pillar supporting the entire temple fell with a bang and smashed on Mordo's leg. Immediately afterwards, Mordo's wail echoed throughout Kamar Taj. King, what's wrong? Could it be that something broke into Kamar Taj? But, Kamar Taj has always had the enchantment of the Supreme Mage, what is it that has such great ability to come in? On the side, the king who fell in the ruins reacted. Using the magic energy in his body to form a mental power, he moved the planks that were pressed on his body, and after standing up from the ruins, he found that the strong magical energy just now seemed to have destroyed the temple. No, it's not just the temple. It can be said that the entire Kamar Taj was destroyed by half. A gap tens of meters wide split Kamar Taj in half, and the gap seemed to be spreading. In that gap, almost all of Kamar Taj buildings disappeared, leaving only a black smoke. If it weren't for the fact that the temple where Wang and Mordo were located was only hid by the energy, it would probably have disappeared. Seeing this scene, the expression on the king's face instantly became solemn. Don't. Dormammu's believers broke into Kamar Taj. Or is there an evil force from another dimension invading Kamar Taj? Oops. Library. Wang Xin was shocked and quickly looked towards the library. Call. Fortunately, the library is still there. Wait. As if forgot something, Master Brother. At this time, Wang remembered Mordo. At the same time, Mordo's wail sounded in his ears. At this moment, Mordo was pressed under the ruins and could not move, and the most important thing was the top pillar that pressed on Mordo's leg. That's more than 2,000 pounds. At this time, Mordo, who had previously been crushed by the Sword of the Open, could not concentrate on using magic at all. This top pillar pressed down. I'm afraid that my feet will also be swollen. Wang, senior brother, are your feet okay? Mordo was furious. Don't ask. Get things off my feet. Wang suddenly remembered and said busily, oh, good. He was about to help Mordo remove the pillar on his feet, when suddenly, he only heard a shout, Archmage. Not good. Wang quickly turned his head and saw Berkeley running over, looking panicked. What's wrong? Wang looked solemn. Did someone break into Kamar Taj? It's not. Archmage. Berkeley took 2 breaths and said busily. You asked Zhang Yang not to use a sword, and I forgot about it all at once. Zhang Yang had just used a sword for actual combat training with Thor, and then, Kamar Taj became like this. King. Mordo. Publicity. You fool. Smashed my hands. Now it's smashing my feet again. Do I have a feud with you? Can you ruin most of the Kamar Taj by playing a real combat training with Thor? Are you training in real combat or are you planning to destroy Kamar Taj? Exile. Such people must be exiled. Mordo was furious in his heart. Wang. Is anyone hurt? Berkeley. Fortunately, the mages and apprentices at Kamar Taj are training, basically at the training ground, and no one is injured. Mordo. I'm not a human. Quote. There was no time to take care of Mordo, and Wang said to Berwick a little anxiously, Go and call Zhongyang to the Temple of the Supreme Venerable, I'll have to ask him what's going on. Berkeley. It seems that the Temple of the Supreme Venerable is also gone. Wang. What about the Temple of the Mages? Berkeley. It's gone. Wang. Where else is there? Berkeley. The library seems to be still there. Wang said angrily, then tell Zhongyang to go to the library. At this time, Mordo, who was pressed by the top pillar on the side, was very angry, and at the same time there was some despair. Can you save me first? I feel like my legs are going to die. Asgard, Asgard, Asgard. Odin was about to rest, but suddenly he seemed to sense an uninvited guest. Soon, a man wearing a yellow robe and a hood appeared in Odin's palace. The person who came was Ji Yuyi. Are you here to ask for sin? Seeing Ji Yuyi, Odin frowned, and his expression was not very good. In fact, anyone who wants to change will look like Odin, and he doesn't look very good. After all, this praise did not pit Odin once or twice. Ji Yuyi knew that he lowered his posture a little in front of Odin. First saluted, then said to Odin, I have come to ask for sin, by the way, ask the God King about it. Odin's eyes sharpened, looking at Ji Yuyi majestically, and couldn't help but say, You also have something to ask me. It's really strange. Ji Yuyi smiled, and did not mince words. I came to the God King. Originally I wanted to ask the God King about his previous evaluation of Zhongyang, but he had an impression. Hearing the name Zhongyang, Odin was angry. No. Simple and neat 2 words. Odin lifted his robe and wanted to see off the guests. Sensing Odin's intentions, Ji Yuyi said busily to Odin, Zhongyang can freely enter and exit the dimension of Dormammu. This sentence made Odin stunned. Dormammu. Odin had heard of it himself. It's just that Zhongyang can freely enter and exit the dimensional space of Dormammu, and Odin is a little surprised. Seeing that Odin didn't make the next move, Ji Yuyi continued, I was shocked by Zhongyang when I was brought to the dark dimension of Dormammu. I thought there would be a battle, but I didn't want to. Zhongyang actually brought me out again. Although it was embarrassing to be pitted by the apprentice, considering that he was now asking Odin for help. Ji Yuyi still said it. Sure enough, hearing such a thing, the expression on Odin's face eased a lot. Seeing that Ji Yuyi is still unhappy, you accepted such a powerful apprentice, and now, I finally pit you too. Odin coughed lightly, touched his beard, and said a little arrogantly, I told you a long time ago that Zhongyang is someone that you Kamar Taj can't keep. Ji Yuyi asked modestly, what did the God King discover? Odin nodded. It's not a big discovery, it's just that when I saw him for the first time before, I tested him with divine power and found that there seemed to be a very powerful energy fluctuation in his body, but only for a moment. Furuchi frowned. She didn't notice this. Ji Yuyi only sensed that there was magical energy in Zhongyang's body. Probably, it may be a little higher than the magic energy in Wang Yang's body now, but as for the powerful power that Odin said, Ji Yuyi did not notice it. Good understanding, but true. I have also tried, but I have not found the powerful energy fluctuations mentioned by the God King. Ji Yuyi said to Odin. It's not that Ji Yuyi doesn't believe Odin, it's just that Ji Yuyi thinks that what Odin can detect, he shouldn't notice. It's just for a moment. And I don't know exactly what that energy is, but I did detect it at the time. Odin couldn't help but say. Thinking of that energy, Odin was still shocked. Ji Yu nodded, looked at Odin and asked, probably, how strong is it? Ji Yuyi meant how strong the energy in Zhongyang's body was, and Odin obviously understood. Can't judge. Odin looked at Ji Yuyi with a sharp gaze. This sentence could not be judged and made Ji Yuyi stunned. Even Odin couldn't judge the intensity of energy. It seems that it is indeed not to be underestimated. And Furuchi also discovered something. Zhongyang seems to have never used the thing of suspense. Ji Yuyi was a little shocked when he found out before, and originally wanted to ask Zhongyang, but when he taught Zhongyang later, he forgot about it. But now, Ji Yuyi suddenly remembered, and realized that something was wrong. Think of it this way. Ji Yuyi felt that the powerful energy in Odin that Zhongyang's body might really exist. However, you don't need to worry, that energy is not an evil force. Odin said to Ji Yuyi pertinently. Although Zhang Yang did do a lot of excessive things to Odin. But as a god king, Odin doesn't talk nonsense. I believe in my vision, naturally, and in the vision of the god king. Ancient Thick Yi Xing. Then, it will be a matter of bothering the god king. As soon as the words fell, Ji Yuyi walked out of the immortal palace. She couldn't help but think about what Odin had said. If you want to say that Ji Yuyi doubts Zhang Yang, it is not. After all, when Ji Yuyi looked at Zhang Yang's future before, he saw the holy light. The holy light proves the supremacy. This also proves that the future of bragging is promising and bright. Although this is the case, there is something about Zhang Yang, Ji Yuyi still understands it clearly. Thinking about it like this, Ji Yuyi was planning to go to the Eternal Emperor, and suddenly, Ji Yuyi's face turned pale. Kamar Taj is in danger. Something actually broke her enchantment directly. Ji Yuyi looked stunned, and he immediately turned on the perception magic on the Asgard square. It's good if you don't open it, and the people of the ancient capital are stupid. Kamar Taj was cut in half by Zhang Yang's sword. Is this the powerful energy that Odin said came out of his mouth? Wrong. Sword in the stone. Why is there a legendary sword in the stone in Zhang Yang's hands? Furuchi was a little shocked. But after living for a long time, Ji Yuyi quickly came back to his senses. Hey, she's only been gone for a day. Kamar Taj came out with such a big basket. The most important thing is that the enchantment is broken, and Kamar Taj is afraid that it will appear in front of the world. Thinking of this, Ji Yuyi's brain hurt for a while. No, Zhang Yang sent her to the dark dimension of Dormammu before, and now he has destroyed half of Kamar Taj. Is it a blessing or a curse to accept this apprentice? Remembering that Ji Yuyi was still laughing before, Odin was pitted by Zhang Yang. This will. Ji Yuyi sighed, and couldn't help but think of an ancient saying. Heaven's way is good reincarnation, you see who the sky spared. The Eternal Emperor can't go there, let's go back to Kamar Taj first. At this time, Ji Yuyi had a rare trace of melancholy in his heart. The only thing she could be slightly relieved was that, at least, no dark creatures from another dimension had invaded Kamar Taj. Zhang Yang was walking on his way to the library. Along the way, looking at Kamar Taj's broken appearance, Zhang Yang felt a pang of nervousness in his heart. It's such a big trouble again, hey. Zhang Yang said, stopped and looked at the empty Kamar Taj. Presumably, at this time, the mages should have been assembled for a meeting. After all, such a big thing has just happened, and someone has to stand up and explain. With a nervous heart, Zhang Yang was just about to step to the library. At this moment, Zhang Yang looked at a young girl standing not far from him. The girl seemed to be looking at Zhang Yang, and she kept looking at it with that straight and naked look. Looking at Zhang Yang, he was a little stunned. The two looked at each other like this for a while, and neither of them spoke. Maybe I feel a little embarrassed. Zhang Yang looked away and prepared to continue walking towards the library. Not wanting to open up just moved, the girl took a step forward. With a move of her foot, the girl also moved forward. Until the girl stood in front of Zhang Yang, less than a meter apart between the two, Zhang Yang finally couldn't help but stop. His eyes were fixed on the girl in front of him. Big. Really, it's too big. Isn't it pretty? A slightly charming voice sounded in his ears, and this time, Zhang Yang reacted instantly. Yilian took a few steps back, and said a little embarrassed, it's very good looking. This is a truth. Of course, Zhang Yang is not only referring to the key points of this girl's good looks. But the girl in front of me looks very stunning. I feel that I belong to the kind of look that can be found at first glance in the crowd and be amazed. To stay in front of Zhang Yang's crossing, just this girl's appearance, absolutely kill a number of top female stars and what beauty pageant champions. You're quite honest, your name is Zhang Yang, right? Hearing Zhang Yang say this, the girl's face was full of smiles. The girl's body seems to have its own magic. There is a feeling that when you laugh, it seems that the whole world lights up. This made Zhang Yang can't help but feel a little emotional. You know, in the current bright and green world, it is difficult to find a woman who is as charming as the girl in front of you, but she reveals a trace of purity in her cuteness. The most important thing is that it is big enough. Yes, how do you know my name? Hearing the girl call out her name, Zhang Yang was a little surprised, and he couldn't help but be vigilant. Zhang Yang was very sure that he absolutely did not know the girl in front of him. Otherwise, with this girl's appearance, Zhang Yang would not be able to remember. You are the mage of Kamar Taj and it is not difficult to know your name. The girl replied, and suddenly looked Zhang Yang up and down several times with a pair of big eyes, nodded with satisfaction, and said to herself, not bad, it seems that it has awakened. Zhang Yang was stunned. Not bad. What's good? What awakening? The girl did not answer. She just smiled and said to Zhang Yang, my name is Qing, it's nice to meet you, Master Zhang Yang. When the words fell, before Zhang Yang spoke, the girl blinked her right eye at Zhang Yang and said a little mischievously, your name, you have to remember well, because in the future, I will be the woman who accompanies you all your life. Zhang Yang was stunned. Poof, what's the thing? The woman who accompanied me all my life. No, am I that handsome? Suddenly a woman came and said that she wanted to accompany me all my life. It's a bit, right. Zhang Yang thought to himself, just about to ask what Qing just said what he meant. When Zhang Yang came to his senses, Qing was gone. And there is no trace of it disappearing. If it weren't for the faint fragrance remaining in the air, Zhang Yang would have some doubts about whether Qing's appearance had caused him to hallucinate. What a strange person. Kathmandu, Nepal. Captain, this has been looking for so long, otherwise we will go back. Bustling streets, cities full of yellow sand. The agents of shield-wearing tights were saying to Black Widow with a helpless look at this time, it seemed that each of them had tired faces, and so was Black Widow. Can't find Kamar Taj, don't think about going back. Black Widow said coldly. Although his face is expressionless, his heart is magnificent. Kamar Taj, where is this place? I've been looking for it for almost half a month. The whole of Kathmandu is turned over. Haven't found it yet. Nick Fury's intelligence shouldn't be fake, right? Black Widow thought to herself, looking unhappy. If it weren't for Nick Fury's death order saying that Kamar Taj was not allowed to go back without finding him, Black Widow would have returned to New York long ago, and would definitely not stay in this place where birds don't. Black Widow was displeased in her heart, and looked at the agent who was on duty with her and said, hey, a few of you, I'll look for it over there. Black Widow said, walking alone with standard cat steps towards a small alley. After looking for a while, and then asking for a while, it was still fruitless. Black Widow felt irritated in her heart, and sat directly on the steps on the side of the road, ready to take a sip of water to rest. At this moment, Black Widow suddenly heard a noise. Before she could react, she saw a strong golden light flash in front of her eyes. Immediately, the row of houses in front of Black Widow was destroyed in an instant, replaced by a wide and long gap with black smoke on it. A powerful impact force rushed towards the Black Widow, and the mineral water held by the Black Widow in her hand was shaken by this powerful impact and splashed the water on the Black Widow's face. Black Widow, what the heck? What happened? Earthquake, aliens invading Earth. What happened just now? Hey, what about the row of houses in front of me? Did I just almost go to God? At this moment, Black Widow stayed in place, her hair was dripping water, Black Widow froze in place, and for a moment, Black Widow felt as if she had just walked around the ghost door. God, just a little. If the light just now leaned a little closer to Black Widow's side, Black Widow would be cool on the spot. This is simply a death distance. If you hadn't been sitting on this step yourself, she's dead. What just happened? Black Widow thought involuntarily in her heart, not realizing that her whole body had begun to tremble at this moment. After a while, Black Widow recovered from this burst of surprise. Groove, this Kathmandu, there is definitely a problem. Kamar Taj, inside the library. Fangyong, a roar sounded from Kamar Taj's library, which alarmed the entire Kamar Taj for a while. Thor and Zhang Yang stood in the library. Opposite the two, stood Wang and Mordo. It's just that unlike usual, this time Mordo has less majesty than usual but more anger. At this time, he was sitting in a wheelchair, looking at Zhang Yang, his face was livid. The angry one seemed to tremble a little. It was clear that there were still bloody wounds on his face, as if he had just experienced a catastrophe. But if it seems like this, it is true that Kamar Taj has also experienced a catastrophe. Seeing Mordo like this, Saul on the side couldn't hold back, and laughed, ha ha, at Mordo, laughing and saying to Mordo, "Hey, Mordo, why are you like this? Have you started a wheelchair to enjoy your old age in advance?" Thor looked at Mordo and couldn't help but laugh. Only at this time, Thor didn't seem to be much better than Mordo. Because his butt was injured again, Thor was lying on a wooden board at the moment, extremely restless. "You still say me, you take care of yourself." Mordo was angry, glared at Saul, and then looked at Jongyang. Think his Grand Kamar Taj master brother was actually put into a wheelchair. This is simply a great insult. And all this is thanks to Jongyang. Just hurt his hand. Will this smash his foot too? What kind of blood mold did he pour to meet such a guy as Jongyang? How should he teach apprentices in the future? Go in a wheelchair. Fengyang, do you know that your current behavior has violated the rules of Kamar Taj? According to the rules, you will be exiled to another dimension. Mordo said this almost through gritted teeth. There was unusual anger in his eyes. That look, it felt that Mordo almost wanted to leave Kamar Taj early. Seeing this, Wang on the side coughed lightly, and quickly said, "Jongyang, you're too. When the Supreme Mage comes back, you see how the Supreme Mage cleans you up." Wang's words are clearly showing favoritism. According to Kamar Taj's rules, what Jongyang is committing now should indeed be expelled. But the problem is that Wang does not want to promote such a good seedling to be expelled. What's more, Jongyang is now a disciple of Ji Yuyi. Ji Yuyi has the direct right to dispose of Jongyang. So Wang is also reminding Mordo not to cross the level. After Wang finished speaking, Saul on the side said impatiently, "Isn't it just a discussion? As for, isn't it all like this in combat? You Kamar Taj just break the rules." To be honest, Thor really didn't want to hear Mordo and Wang talking about each other. If it weren't for the fact that he was carried over. Sure enough, as soon as Thor came, he had to hear these people talking and nagging, which was really annoying. Then how about letting Jongyang try it in your Asgard during the next actual battle? Hearing Thor's words, Mordo's face turned blue, and looking at Thor, Mordo said angrily, "God, do you fight in Asgard? What if Jongyang went to your Asgard to slash a sword? By the way, let your father Odin also be in a wheelchair. See if Odin will set off firecrackers and send away this goods. We in Asgard are not like you Kamar Taj without slashing, 2 cuts are gone. I say, you Kamar Taj is also too low, right? What kind of old buildings are these? Not at all our Asgardian style." Listening to Mordo's words, Thor immediately couldn't help but boast about his great Asgard. Mordo was angry and hateful. Helplessly, his hands are swollen now, and his feet can't move, otherwise, he will definitely teleport to let Thor stay in the teleportation channel for a while. It's really time for Kamar Taj to get a new building." Mordo was angry and was about to speak, when suddenly a voice came from the air, and in the next second, a tall portal opened in the air, and Ji Yuyi, wearing a yellow monk's suit and a hood, appeared in the library. "Come, it's Ji Yuyi. Supreme Venerable." Seeing Ji Yuyi, several people hurriedly saluted. Only Mordo, with an embarrassed face, he also wanted to salute, but helplessly, he was in a wheelchair, he couldn't salute. "Mordo, what's wrong with you? Was he injured while fighting against Dormammu's believers?" At the same time, Ji Yuyi also sensed that something was wrong, looked at Mordo with a startled expression, and couldn't help asking. "Supreme Venerable." Mordo looked embarrassed and looked at Ji Yuyi. God, if he were beaten by Dormammu's believers, he would have said a little. Anyway, it's heroic. But the problem is that the injuries on his hands and feet were all caused by Jongyang, so how could he talk to Ji Yuyi? Say that he was inexplicably attacked by his own junior brother at Kamar Taj. What? Thinking of this, Mordo became angry and said to Ji Yuyi busily, "Supreme Venerable, when you were away, Jongyang was lawless, and he actually destroyed most of Kamar Taj. I suggest that Master you severely punish the bragging. Exile him." Wang on the side heard Mordo say this, and quickly turned to Ji Yuyi, "Master, this can't actually be blamed on Jongyang." Wang was about to open his mouth to help Jongyang speak, but at this moment, Ji Yuyi looked at Wang and said, "Okay, you will take Mordo to the temple to heal his injuries." Obviously, she already knew the meaning of Wang and Mordo's words in her heart. "So I plan to argue with them again. because in Ji Yuyi's heart, he obviously had already made a decision. However, hearing the words of going to the temple to heal his injuries, the king's face suddenly showed a difficult color, but Supreme Venerable, the temple. The temple was destroyed by fanfare. Wang looked depressed, but he couldn't speak, and he estimated in his heart that when Ji Yuyi came, Bakang also saw it. It's already fixed. Although Wang only said half of what he said, Ji Yuyi also understood in his heart, and in 4 simple and clear words, he told everyone present that Kamar Taj had been repaired by her. Ji Yuyi's words made everyone froze, including Thor. Won't it, Koichi, Kamar Taj is fixed. So fast. Did you fix it? Thor was obviously a little surprised, looking at Ji Yuyi's face full of incredulity. Ignoring Thor's rudeness, Ji Yuyi said lightly. This shocked Thor again, thinking that this Gui still has some skills. The king on the side is much calmer. After all, the power of Ji Yuyi, Kamar Taj people know, it's just that for Thor to call Ji Yuyi's name, Wang is a little displeased, but seeing that Ji Yuyi didn't say anything, Wang was not good to speak, just glared at Saul and said, the supreme mage has his own way. Thor lay on the wooden bed and grinned at Gui. Hey, what Gui, can you repair Kamar Taj as well as my hammer? You fix my hammer okay. Thor had anticipation on his face, like the silly son of a landlord. Ji Yuyi glanced at Saul, and did not answer Thor's question, but said lightly, Thor, what's wrong with your ass again? Saul, I said to you, can you stop staring at my ass all day long? What the hell is my ass provoking you? I'm afraid you're all hungry for me, are you? With a ruthless glance at Zhang Yang, Thor gambled and said, it's not that he did it yet. He said that the sword in his hand was an ordinary sword, and it turned out to be good, not only poked me in the ass, but also almost didn't hack me to death. When the words fell, Thor glared at Zhang Yang. Although Thor was really startled by the sword in Zhang Yang's hand, the problem was that Thor himself was a guy who had forgotten his scars and pain. Now that this surprise has passed, Thor still looks like he doesn't admit defeat and says to Zhang Yang, I tell you, when my hammer is repaired, we will fight again. You just see that I don't have a hammer in my hand, that's why you're so presumptuous. When the words fell, Thor seemed to remember something, and said to Ji Yuyi, Hey, I said Ji Yuyi, can you fix that hammer for me? Seeing this, Ji Yuyi smiled and said to Saul, You are the god of Thor, not a hammer god, your power of Thor is its own strength, and Mjolnir's hammer is just an auxiliary. When the words fell, Ji Yuyi looked at Wang and said, You guys go down first, I have something to tell Zhang Yang. Ji Yu gave the order, and the king quickly answered, but Saul on the side was not satisfied, and chattered, No, that hammer has been following me, I have feelings. You Kamar Taj burst my hammer, you can't leave it alone like this. Hey, I said. Before Saul's words were finished, he was directly sent away by Wang Yi's teleportation magic. Finally, he rolled his eyes and muttered in a low voice, That's a lot of nonsense. Clapping his hands, Wang looked at Ji Yuyi and immediately bowed to Ji Yuyi with a pleasant face. Mordo, who was pushing a wheelchair, was about to leave. I didn't want Mordo to speak again, Master. Just said 2 words. Ji Yuyi took off his hood and walked to the tea table, took the teapot and poured a cup of tea, and said lightly, I have a certain number in my heart. Mordo. Master, you are too obvious, really. Your eccentricity is too obvious. You can't be so partial because you show your talent. You lose your disciples so easily. Mordo couldn't help but feel a little sad in his heart. Seeing Mordo like this, Wang quickly pushed Mordo down. Pushing all the way to the door of the temple, Mordo was angry, raised his ball-like hands and said, King. I've become like this, but the master is still partial to flamboyance. Isn't it too much? Wang glanced at Mordo and said, Who made you not talented enough? It's okay, it's not a big deal, and no one is injured. What's more, you didn't tell Zhang Yang that his sword was powerful, and those who didn't know it were not guilty. Modu was stunned and glared at Wang, Am I not a person? Is this special? Not a big deal yet. I'm in a wheelchair, okay. I insist that one day I will be punished to death. Taking a step back, the more Mordo thinks, the more angry he becomes. No, I'm such a big thing, why did the whole Kamar Taj get hurt on him? He and Zhang Yang are at odds, right? Mordo was angry and was pushed by the king to the temple to heal his wounds. Along the way, Mordo, who felt the strange gazes of the mages, couldn't wait to find a hole to drill into. Really, it's a shame. I have never been so humiliated in my life. Kamar Taj's master brother actually got into a wheelchair. Hey, in the end, Mordo turned into a sigh. And at this time, inside the library, Ji Yuyi looked at Zhang Yang and said nothing. This made Zhang Yang a little embarrassed. Thinking that he had caused trouble, Zhang Yang didn't know what to say for a while. The extra magic weapon in your hand, let me see. Looking at Zhang Yang, Ji Yuyi said. Zhang Yang's heart tightened, and he knew that Ji Yuyi would definitely be like this. Immediately cast a retrieval magic, took the sword, and handed it to Ji Yuyi. Furuchi stretched out his hand and took the sword with both hands. Unlike Mordo and Wang's reactions, Ji Yuyi seemed to be very relaxed with the sword. This made Zhang Yang a little puzzled. Originally, when he looked at Mordo and Wang holding the sword, it was like the sword was very heavy, and he dropped the sword, but this time, Ji Yuyi held it but did not react. Zhang Yang thought to himself, maybe he thought too much, so he left this problem behind. Where did you get this sword? After reading the sword, Ji Yuyi handed the sword to Zhang Yang and couldn't help asking. This is my own alchemy. Zhang Yang said truthfully. Koichi, what kind of thing? The sword and the stone you refined yourself. I was idle and bored to study alchemy by myself, but I didn't expect it to be refined. Originally I thought it was just a mediocrity sword. Zhang Yang explained. Koichi, what a mediocre one. Kamar Taj's magic room can basically be changed. I have studied alchemy for so long, and so far I have created 3 fairly good artifacts. The latter is not given by others, or given by others. The first time you forged alchemy, you refined the sword and the stone. Ji Yuyi suddenly found that her apprentice was not such a simple thing as good understanding at all. That's pretty lucky. However, whether Zhang Yang refined the sword in the stone or the sword in the stone identified Zhang Yang, Ji Yuyi was still a little unsure. Looking at Zhang Yang, Ji Yuyi couldn't help but ask, by the way, then have you met any strange people? Strange people. Zhang Yang frowned. There is a woman who said something inexplicable, and the person is gone. Now I think of the woman named Haru. The more Zhang Yang thought about it, the more wrong it became. God babbled a bunch of words, and as a result, the people were gone. What the hell? Don't worry about her, practice your magic with peace of mind. Furuchi responded with a flamboyant. She knew very well in her heart that the sword and the stone was generally guarded by the Merlin family for generations. And the owner identified by the sword and the stone as the person who has been guarded by the Merlin family for generations. When King Arthur took up the sword and the stone, he was assisted by Mage Merlin. It's just that Ji Yuyi didn't want Zhang Yang to be influenced by the outside world before becoming a qualified supreme mage, and before the people of the Merlin family could enter, presumably because Zhang Yang cut through the enchantment. Now Furuchi has repaired the enchantment and strengthened it. Ji Yuyi hoped that Zhang Yang could cultivate magic with peace of mind. It's a good sword. Thinking about it like this, Ji Yuyi said to Zhang Yang. However, magic weapons are good magic weapons, but they also need the owner of the magic weapon to be strong enough to play the maximum role, so Zhang Yang, you still need to work hard to cultivate. Zhang Yang nodded, he knew this very well in his heart. Yet, Ji Yuyi looked at Zhang Yang and smiled. You are quite talented in alchemy, you can make more magic weapons, in the future, maybe you can also use it. Ji Yuyi did not shy away from anything, but said directly to Zhang Yang. This made Zhang Yang feel a little happy in his heart. A good magic weapon can help a mage grow quickly, although this sword is not bad, but compared to the entire multiverse, it is still a little worse. Without pause, Ji Yuyi said to the point. Indeed, it is worse than the cosmic cube. It's just that Zhang Yang has not been able to grasp the essence of the cosmic Rubik's Cube well, and if he can, presumably the cosmic Rubik's Cube can exert a strong achievement in Zhang Yang's hands. Okay, Master, I'll study more. Zhang Yang said to Ji Yuyi. Ji Yu nodded, picked up the teacup and took a sip of tea. Research is research, but don't leave the matter of practice behind. By the way, how do you feel about the power of space that you studied before? Ji Yuyi didn't seem to mention that Kamar Taj was cut in half by Zhang Yang, which eased Zhang Yang's apprehensive mood. Looking at Ji Yuyi, Zhang Yang answered truthfully, recently, my thoughts are not bad, now I can carry out space distortion, but the scope of use is not large, and I can only use it in this temple for the time being. Zhang Yang said truthfully to Ji Yuyi. This made Ji Yuyi's hand that was drinking tea stop, and froze in place for a while, although it looked like he was drinking tea, but in fact, Ji Yuyi was surprised in his heart. It's only been 4 days, Zhang Yang can already do spatial distortion. Ji Yuyi knew that Zhang Yang's talent was not bad, but the problem was, it wouldn't be so good. It's only been 4 days. Space magic. This will make Ji Yuyi a little surprised. Originally Ji Yuyi felt that his talent was better than Strange's. After all, according to Ji Yuyi's previous observations, if Strange studied magic, he should be the best mage ever. But now it seems that Zhang Yang's talent really dumped Strange several streets. This will, Ji Yuyixin was a little happy. Originally Zhang Yang cut Kamar Taj, Ji Yuyi felt a little helpless. Thinking that he had only been out for a short day, Zhang Yang would get into trouble. Not wanting to come back this time, Zhang Yang actually brought himself 2 surprises in a row. Gee, it seems that soon, Zhang Yang will be able to become an excellent supreme mage. Ji Yuyi thought to himself. At this moment, Zhang Yang on the side saw that Ji Yuyi didn't speak, and couldn't help but call Ji Yuyi, Master. Ji Yuyi then slowed down and looked at Zhang Yang and said, it's not bad. Although he was shocked in his heart, Ji Yuyi's evaluation was very pertinent, neither letting the apprentice be hit, nor making the apprentice feel too floating. Mage, originally you have to keep a calm heart. There is still a lot of practice. Ji Yuyi said lightly. You need to comprehend more about the power of space in the follow-up, and combine it with the cosmic cube to comprehend together, so that your progress will be faster. Zhang Yang nodded, and was about to speak, when Ji Yuyi suddenly asked, Today I plan to teach you astral projection magic little by little from today. If the name is difficult for you to understand, you can also call it an out-of-body body. A good mage must cultivate a strong soul. Zhang Yang was stunned. Out of body, out of body. Isn't that an out-of-body experience? Astral projection magic is a kind of high-level magic. It is mainly to exercise the strength of your soul, or more simply, you can understand it as spiritual power. Ji Yuyi looked at Zhang Yang and said. In fact, the reason why Zhang Yang practiced souls was because as a qualified supreme mage, this was one of the compulsory magics. This ability is both strong and pretending. But any advanced mage can do it, because it extremely tests a mage's spiritual power. So Ji Yuyi believes that this magic is time to be put on the agenda to teach Zhang Yang. It's just that this magic, abnormal danger, after all, is the separation of spirit and body. If you don't get it right, you may not be able to go back, which requires the test that the mage cannot have a little distraction and must concentrate. For security reasons, for ostentatiousness. Ji Yuyi said to Zhang Yang. You can go back and think about the ability of astral projection magic, but the premise is that you must ensure that you can only use it when I am until I think you can use it independently. Yes, Supreme Venerable. Then I'll teach you now, astral projection magic. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.